Vivian Hale had always believed that love could survive anything until the night her husband ordered champagne to celebrate leaving her. Across a white tablecloth at London's most exclusive restaurant, Adrian Cross looked her in the eye and told her he'd found someone better, someone younger, someone worth the life they'd built together. He expected her to cry, to beg, to shatter like fine china dropped on marble. Instead, Vivian did something far more dangerous. She smiled, picked up her wine glass, and began planning his complete destruction. If you want to see how a woman takes back everything that was stolen from her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The restaurant was called Lumiere, which Vivian had always thought was pretentious. Too many mirrors, too much gold leaf, too many people trying desperately to look like they belonged. But Adrian loved it here. He loved being seen in places like this, loved the way the staff knew his name, loved the tiny portions arranged like abstract art on oversized plates. Tonight he'd made reservations 3 weeks in advance. Their anniversary was still 2 months away, and it wasn't her birthday. When he'd told her to wear something nice, she'd felt a small flutter of hope. Maybe he'd finally noticed how distant they'd become. Maybe he wanted to fix things. She'd chosen a navy dress, simple and elegant, the kind that made her feel like herself. Her dark hair was pulled back, and she wore the pearl earrings her mother had given her. At 34, Vivian still turned heads, though she'd never been the type to notice or care. Adrian was already at the table when she arrived. He looked good. He always did. Tailored suit, perfect hair, that confident smile that had first attracted her 8 years ago when they'd met at a gallery opening. He stood when he saw her, kissed her cheek with the kind of distant affection you'd give a colleague. "You look lovely," he said, and she could hear the performance in it. "Thank you." She sat down, placed her clutch on the table, and studied his face. Something was different. His eyes were bright, almost excited, like a kid with a secret. The waiter appeared immediately. Adrian had that effect on service staff. He ordered champagne without asking her preference, then spent 5 minutes discussing the wine list with an enthusiasm that felt excessive even for him. When they were alone again, Vivian folded her hands on the table. "So, what's the occasion? Can a husband take his wife out for a nice dinner?" "Of course he can." She kept her voice level. "But you don't." Adrian's smile flickered. He'd probably expected her to play along, to pretend this was normal. They'd gotten good at pretending over the years. Pretending they were happy. Pretending they still talked about anything that mattered. Pretending the space between them wasn't growing wider every day. The champagne arrived in a bucket of ice. Adrian made a show of tasting it, nodding his approval like he knew the difference between a good year and a great one. He didn't. Vivian had always been the one with the refined palate, but he'd never let that stop him from performing expertise. He poured for both of them, raised his glass. To honesty. That's when she knew. The word hung in the air like smoke. Honesty. People only toasted to honesty when they were about to blow your life apart. Vivian lifted her glass but didn't drink. She watched him over the rim, waiting. Adrian took a long sip, set down his glass, and leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, about us, about what I want from life." "Go on." "We've been together a long time, Viv. 8 years married, 9 altogether. That's not nothing." "No," she said quietly. "It's not nothing. But I think we both know things haven't been right for a while." He was using his boardroom voice, the one he deployed when he wanted to sound reasonable while saying something unreasonable. "We've grown apart. We want different things, and I think it's time we both admitted that." Vivian set down her glass with careful precision. The champagne had gone flat in her mouth. "What are you saying, Adrian?" He had the decency to pause, at least. To look almost uncomfortable, but then that expression smoothed away, replaced by something harder. "I'm saying I've met someone. Someone who makes me feel alive again. Someone who reminds me what it's like to be excited about the future." The words should have hurt. They were designed to hurt, but Vivian felt strangely detached, like she was watching this scene happen to someone else. Someone. "Her name is Lila Mercer. She's..." He caught himself, smiled slightly. "Well, it doesn't matter who she is. What matters is that I've realized I can't keep living a lie. I owe it to both of us, to be honest." There it was again. Honesty. as if cheating on your wife was somehow noble when you admitted it over expensive champagne. How long? Vivian's voice came out steady, almost clinical. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of late nights at the office, of business trips that suddenly multiplied. 6 months of coming home to her bed smelling like someone else's perfume, while Vivian made excuses for him in her own head. I see. She picked up her menu, opened it, scanned the appetizers with the same attention she'd give a grocery list. Have you decided what you're having? Adrian blinked. What? For dinner. Have you decided? Vivian, did you hear what I heard you. She didn't look up from the menu. You're in love with someone named Lila Mercer. You've been sleeping with her for 6 months, and you want to end our marriage. Did I miss anything? His jaw tightened. This wasn't going according to script. I thought you'd want to talk about this. What's there to talk about? You've clearly made up your mind. She closed the menu, met his eyes, with a calm that seemed to unsettle him. The duck looks good. Jesus, Viv, could you at least react like a normal human being? What would you like me to do, Adrian? Cry? Throw my wine in your face? Make a scene so everyone in this overpriced restaurant can watch your wife fall apart? She leaned forward slightly. Is that what you brought me here for? An audience? Color crept up his neck. I brought you here because I thought you deserved to hear it from me, in a civilized way. How thoughtful. Vivian reached for her champagne, took a deliberate sip. It tasted like metal and regret. So what happens now? You move out? I move out? We sell the house? The house? He shifted in his seat. That's actually something we need to discuss. Oh? I've been paying the mortgage for 8 years, Viv. My salary, my career. I think it's only fair that The house is in my name. She said it quietly, but the words landed like stones in still water. My inheritance from my father paid for it. You've been living in my house, Adrian. Not ours. Mine. His expression hardened. We're married. What's yours is ours under the law. Is it? Vivian tilted her head, genuinely curious now. You seem awfully confident about that. Have you consulted a lawyer already? The way his eyes flickered told her everything. Of course he had. He'd planned this whole thing, probably had divorce papers drafted and ready to go. This dinner was just theater, a chance to play the magnanimous husband who tried to do things the right way. I've sought some advice, yes. I wanted to understand my options. Your options. Vivian felt something cold settle in her chest, something that felt almost like relief. At least now she knew. At least the uncertainty was over. And what did your lawyer tell you? That we should divide assets equitably. I keep the house or buy out your share, you keep your little business, we both move on with our lives. Her little business. The consulting firm she'd built from nothing, the one that had supported them both when Adrian was between jobs 3 years ago, the one he'd called cute when she landed her first major contract. I see. Don't be difficult about this, Vivian. I'm trying to be fair. Fair. She turned the word over in her mouth like wine. You want to take my house, the one my father left me, and call it fair. It's been our home for 8 years. I've made improvements, paid for. Paid for? Something sharp crept into her voice now. With what money, Adrian? Because as far as I know, you've been chronically overdrawn for the past 6 months. I've covered 3 mortgage payments myself because you said your bonus was delayed. He had the grace to look away. That's temporary. A cash flow issue. Where's the money going, Adrian? We're not discussing my finances right now. Oh, but we're discussing mine. Vivian set down her glass with enough force to make it ring. You want to take my house, take half of everything I've built, and you can't even tell me where your own salary is going? I don't owe you an accounting. No. She stood up, reached for her clutch. No, I suppose you don't. Not yet. Adrian looked genuinely surprised. Where are you going? Home. My home. To my house. She pulled out her phone, opened her banking app with hands that had started to shake. Enjoy your dinner, Adrian, and your honesty. Vivian, sit down. We're not done talking. Oh, I think we are. She was looking at her phone now, at their joint savings account, and the number staring back at her made the room tilt. Adrian, where's the money? What money? Our savings. There should be £43,000 in this account. What? She turned the screen toward him, watched his face go carefully blank. There's 800. I can explain that. Then explain. Her voice had gone very quiet. People at nearby tables were starting to glance over, but she didn't care anymore. Explain where 42,000 pounds went. He stood up, tried to take her arm. She jerked away. Not here, Viv. Come on, let's go outside and… No. She pulled up transaction histories, months of withdrawals and transfers she'd never authorized. No, we're going to talk about this right here, right now, because I'm looking at charges for hotels I've never been to, restaurants I've never eaten at, purchases at jewelry stores where I've never shopped. I'm looking at 6 months of my money being spent on your… What did you call her? Lila? Lower your voice. Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice. The phone was shaking in her hand. You didn't just cheat on me, you robbed me. Adrian grabbed her wrist, pulled her close enough that only she could hear. His voice was ice. You're making a scene. If you don't calm down and sit back down right now, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of hysterical, unstable woman you are. Vivian looked at his hand on her wrist, at the white pressure of his fingers, and something in her went perfectly, crystalline calm. She'd been afraid of this man for so long without realizing it, afraid of his moods, his criticism, his ability to make her feel small. But fear required respect, and respect required believing someone had power over you. She didn't believe that anymore. Let go of me. She said it loud enough that the couple at the next table definitely heard. Let go of me right now, or I will scream. He dropped her wrist like she'd burned him. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. That terrible, fascinated silence of people pretending not to watch while catching every detail. Vivian stepped back, straightened her dress, and looked at her husband with perfect clarity. He was smaller than she'd thought, just a man in an expensive suit who'd convinced himself that wanting something made it his. I'll be out of the house by morning, he said, low and vicious. And then my lawyer will be in touch. You're going to regret this. No, Adrian. She shouldered her bag, held her head high. You are. She walked out of Lumiere with every eye in the restaurant following her. Let them look. Let them whisper. Let them turn this into gossip for their own dinner parties. She'd given them a show after all. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp and real. Vivian walked 3 blocks before her legs started to shake, 5 blocks before she had to stop and lean against a building, 7 blocks before she admitted to herself that she was lost. Not lost in London, she'd lived here for a decade, knew these streets like her own heartbeat. Lost in her life. Lost in the wreckage of everything she'd thought was solid. Her phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. Don't change the locks, I have rights. She stared at it for a long moment, then opened her contacts and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 3 years. Margaret Chen. They'd gone to university together, studied law while Vivian was doing business. Margaret had gone on to become one of London's most ruthless divorce attorneys, famous for making rich men cry. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Vivian Hale, I was wondering when you'd call. You knew? Sweetheart, I've known for 4 months. Saw your husband with his little girlfriend at the Ivy, pawing at each other like teenagers. I nearly called you then, but… A pause. Well, these things have a way of revealing themselves. Vivian closed her eyes. 4 months. People had known before she did. Can we meet? Where are you? Somewhere in Chelsea. I'm not entirely sure. Send me your location. I'll have a car there in 10 minutes. Margaret's voice gentled slightly. And Vivian, whatever you're feeling right now, anger, humiliation, heartbreak, I need you to set it aside. Can you do that? I don't understand. Emotion is a luxury we can't afford. If you want to win this, if you want to take back everything he's stolen and make him pay for every lie, you need to get cold. Can you do that? Vivian thought about Adrian's hand on her wrist, about 42,000 pounds spent on another woman, about 8 years of her life built on sand. She thought about her father's house, her mother's pearls, the business she'd built with her own hands while Adrian took credit at dinner parties. Yes, she said, I can do that. Good girl, car's on its way. We have a lot of work to do. The line went dead. Vivian stood there in the London night, watching her breath mist in the cold air, and felt something shift inside her. The heartbreak was there. She could feel it waiting, patient and vast. But Margaret was right. Emotion was a luxury. Right now, she had a war to win. The car was a sleek black Mercedes that pulled up exactly 9 minutes later. The driver didn't ask questions, just handed her a bottle of water, and drove in silence to an office building in Mayfair that still had lights burning on the 7th floor. Margaret met her in the lobby, dressed like she'd never left work. Sharp suit, sharper heels, black hair pulled into a bun tight enough to give lesser women a headache. She took one look at Vivian and nodded approvingly. "You're not crying. That's good. I cried out my tear ducts years ago over smaller things." Vivian followed her into the elevator. "I think I'm all out." "Even better." Margaret pressed the button for 7. Tears cloud judgment. Anger focuses it. The office was modern and cold, all glass and steel, and the kind of art that existed solely to prove someone had money. Margaret's corner office overlooked the city, 1,000 lit windows stretching into the dark. She gestured Vivian to a leather chair and sat across from her, pulling out a legal pad. "Start from the beginning. When did you first suspect?" "I didn't. Not really." Vivian felt stupid admitting it. He'd been distant, but I thought it was work stress. He works in finance, and things have been volatile. "Where?" "Hartwell and Sterling. He's a senior analyst." Margaret made a note. "Go on." "Tonight he took me to dinner and told me he was in love with someone else. Lila Mercer. He said they'd been together 6 months, and he wanted a divorce." "How did you react?" "I didn't. Not at first. I think that made him angry. He'd expected tears, I suppose. Then I looked at our bank accounts and found that our savings are gone. £42,000 spent over the past 6 months on hotels, restaurants, jewelry." "Joint account?" "Yes, but the money was mostly mine. Inheritance from my father, savings from my business." Margaret's pen moved faster. "This is good." "This is very good. What about the house?" "In my name. My father's inheritance paid for it outright. Adrian moved in after we got married, but it was never legally his." "Even better. Did he make any improvements, pay for renovations?" Vivian thought back. "We redid the kitchen 3 years ago. I paid for most of it, but he contributed about £5,000. We can handle that. What about his income?" "He makes around $90,000 a year, or he's supposed to. But he's been having trouble with his accounts lately. Overdrawn several times. I've covered some of his expenses." "Gambling?" "I don't think so. I think he's been spending it on Lila." Margaret leaned back, tapping her pen against her lips. "Here's what's going to happen. He's going to come at you hard and fast, trying to scare you into settling quickly before you understand what you're entitled to. He'll use shame, guilt, intimidation, anything to make you feel like you're being unreasonable for wanting what's legally yours. He already grabbed my wrist at dinner, told me I was making a scene." The pen stopped tapping. "Did anyone see?" "Half the restaurant." "Perfect. Did you photograph any bruising?" Vivian looked down at her wrist. There were faint red marks where Adrian's fingers had pressed. "No, but I can. Do it now. Multiple angles, with timestamps." Margaret pushed a business card across the desk. "And I want you to see this doctor tomorrow morning. She specializes in documenting domestic incidents for legal purposes. He didn't hit me. He put his hands on you without consent during an argument about divorce and money. That's assault, Vivian. I know you don't want to think of it that way, but courts do." Margaret's voice was kind but firm. "I'm not saying we lead with that. I'm saying we document everything, build the strongest possible case, and then we decide our strategy." Vivian pulled out her phone with shaking hands and started photographing her wrist. The marks were already fading. By morning, they'd probably be gone. But the camera caught them, preserved them, turned a moment of humiliation into evidence. "What else do I need to do?" "First thing tomorrow, you're changing every password, every PIN, every security code, bank accounts, credit cards, email, phone, everything. Then you're going to sit down and make a list of every asset you own, jointly or separately. Every bank account, every investment, every piece of jewelry, every painting on your walls, everything. That could take days. Then you'd better start tonight." Margaret stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. She poured generous measures and handed one to Vivian. "You asked me if I could help you. I can, but you need to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't going to be quick, and it isn't going to be clean. He's going to say terrible things about you. He's going to try to turn your friends against you, make you look unstable or vindictive or greedy. And when that doesn't work, he's going to offer you settlements that sound reasonable but are designed to cheat you out of what you're owed. And what am I owed? Everything." Margaret raised her glass. You're owed every penny he stole, every asset you brought to the marriage, every bit of compensation for the life he disrupted. And by the time I'm done, he's going to pay for the privilege of having lied to you." They drank. The whiskey burned all the way down, but Vivian welcomed it. She needed something to feel real right now. "There's one more thing," Margaret said carefully. "Lila Mercer. I need to know everything about her. Where she works, where she lives, how they met. Because I guarantee Adrian's not the only one with secrets." "You think she's involved in the money?" "I think a mistress who's comfortable with a married man stealing from his wife to fund their affair is comfortable with a lot of things. And I think people like that tend to have patterns." Margaret sat back down, pulled her laptop toward her. "Spell her name for me." Lilamercer. Margaret's fingers flew across the keyboard. Social media profiles bloomed on the screen: Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. A blonde woman in her late 20s, all sharp angles and practiced pouts. The Instagram was public, filled with photos of expensive dinners, designer handbags, exotic vacations. How old is Adrian? 38? And she's 27. Of course she is. Margaret scrolled through posts, clicking and reading. She works in marketing at a tech startup, or she did. Looks like she quit about 3 months ago. Since then, nothing but travel and shopping. Living off Adrian's money. Living off your money. Margaret pulled up older posts from before the affair started. Interesting. 6 months ago, she was posting about being broke, asking friends for job leads. 2 weeks later, here she is at the Ritz. That's when it started. Or that's when she started documenting it. Could have been going on longer. Margaret made more notes. "Does Adrian know you've hired me?" "No. I called you on my way here." "Good. Keep it that way as long as possible. I want him confident, making mistakes. Men like Adrian always do. They get cocky, think they're smarter than everyone else." She looked up, met Vivian's eyes. "He's going to come home tonight expecting to find you devastated. Instead, I want you to be gone." "Gone where?" "Do you have family in London? Friends you trust?" Vivian thought of her sister, Rebecca, who lived in Notting Hill with her husband and 2 kids. They'd grown apart over the years. Rebecca had never liked Adrian, had made her feelings clear at the wedding. "My sister." "Call her. Tell her you need a place to stay, but don't explain everything yet. Just enough to get you through the door. Then tomorrow, while Adrian's at work, you're going to go back to the house with a locksmith and change every lock." "Can I do that? Legally?" "It's your house, Vivian. Legally, you can do whatever you want with it. He's the one who will have to prove he has a right to be there, and that's going to be very difficult when the deed is in your name and he's publicly declared he wants a divorce." Margaret smiled, and there was something wolfish in it. "We're going to make this very, very expensive for him." Vivian should have felt guilty. Should have felt like this was stooping to his level, playing dirty. But all she felt was a cold, clean anger. "When do we start?" "We already have." Margaret turned her laptop around, showed Vivian a document she'd been typing while they talked. "This is a cease and desist letter informing Adrian Hale that he is prohibited from accessing accounts under your name, selling or disposing of joint assets, or harassing you in any form. I'll have it delivered to him at work tomorrow morning." "Will that stop him?" "No, but it will create a paper trail when he violates it." Margaret printed the letter, added it to a growing file. "And he will violate it, Vivian. Men like him always do. They can't help themselves." It was past midnight when Vivian finally called Rebecca from the back of another car Margaret had ordered. The phone rang 4 times before her sister answered, voice thick with sleep. "Viv, what's wrong?" "Can I stay with you tonight? I'll explain everything in the morning. Her voice cracked for the first time all night. "I need somewhere to go." Of course. Come now." Rebecca was fully awake now, alert. "Are you safe? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. I'm in a car. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The door will be open." Rebecca lived in a converted Victorian townhouse that always smelled like baking and children's shampoo. She was waiting in the doorway when Vivian arrived, wrapped in a bathrobe, face creased with worry. She didn't ask questions, just pulled Vivian inside and held her while Vivian finally let herself shake. "He left me," Vivian whispered into her sister's shoulder. "Adrian. He's been having an affair, and he took all our money, and he wants the house, and I can't." "Shh. Okay. It's okay." Rebecca guided her to the sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Start from the beginning. So Vivian told her. All of it. The dinner, the confession, the missing money, the marks on her wrist that were already fading. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her face getting harder with every detail. That absolute bastard, she said when Vivian finished. I always knew he was a prick, but this... You tried to warn me. Yeah, well, you were in love, or you thought you were. Rebecca got up, started making tea with the fierce efficiency of someone who needed to do something with her hands. What do you need? What can I do? Let me stay here tonight. Maybe tomorrow too, while I figure things out. You can stay as long as you need. The guest room's yours. Rebecca brought over 2 mugs, sat down close enough that their knees touched. Have you called a lawyer? I just came from one. Margaret Chen. Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. The Margaret Chen, the one who took down that hedge fund manager last year? She's an old friend from university. Then Adrian Hale is a dead man walking. Rebecca raised her mug in a toast. Good. They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, listening to the house settle around them. Upstairs, one of Rebecca's kids coughed in their sleep. The radiator clinked. Outside, London hummed with its endless night traffic. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said finally. Anything. When did you know? Not tonight, but before. When did you know something was wrong? Vivian thought back, tried to pin down the moment everything had started to crack. I think I've known for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. It's easier to pretend, you know? Easier to make excuses, to tell yourself things will get better. And now? Now I'm done pretending. Vivian set down her mug, looked at her sister directly. I'm going to take him apart, Becca. I'm going to take back everything he stole, and I'm going to make sure he never has the chance to do this to anyone else. Rebecca smiled, fierce and proud. There's my sister. I was wondering when she'd show up. Vivian slept that night in Rebecca's guest room, under a quilt that smelled like lavender and safe things. But she didn't sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face across that table, saw the satisfaction in his smile when he told her about Lila, saw the way he'd grabbed her wrist, trying to control her one last time. She woke up at 5 in the morning with her phone buzzing. 3 texts from Adrian. Where are you? This is childish, Vivian. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. If you've changed the locks, I'm calling the police. She screenshot all 3, sent them to Margaret, then blocked his number. Let him call the police. Let him explain why his wife had to flee her own home because he'd assaulted her in public. By 6, she was showered and dressed in the same clothes from last night. Rebecca was already up, making breakfast for her kids, 2 tow-headed boys who looked at Vivian with the frank curiosity of children who knew something was wrong, but not what. Auntie Viv, are you living here now? The younger one asked through a mouthful of cereal. Just visiting, sweetheart. Mum says Uncle Adrian's a tosser. Charlie! Rebecca shot her son a look, but there was no real heat in it. Well, you did say it. I said it to your father, not to you. She turned to Vivian. Sorry, 6-year-olds have no filter. It's fine. Vivian found she was almost smiling. And for the record, Mum's right. Her phone buzzed again. Margaret. Doctor's appointment is at 9. I've sent you the address. After that, meet me at your house with the locksmith. I want photographs of everything before Adrian has a chance to take anything. Vivian texted back. He has keys, not for long. The doctor's office was in Harley Street, all quiet professionalism and potted plants. Doctor. Sarah Okonkwo was a woman in her 50s with steady hands and kind eyes who photographed Vivian's wrist from every angle, took detailed notes about the incident, and had Vivian sign a statement that would hold up in court. I've seen worse, she said gently, but I've also seen women who didn't document things like this regret it later. You're being smart. I'm being paranoid. No. Dr. Okonkwo met her eyes. You're being careful. There's a difference. By 10:30, Vivian was standing on her own doorstep with Margaret, a locksmith named Dave who'd seen it all before, and a photographer Margaret had hired to document the house's condition. Adrian's car wasn't in the drive. He'd be at work, or so she hoped. Her key still worked. The house was exactly as she'd left it yesterday morning, before the world had tilted. Coffee mug in the sink, Adrian's jacket on the back of a chair, mail piled on the hall table. It looked like a home. It looked like a lie. Start with the bedrooms, Margaret instructed the photographer. Then the office, the living areas, anything with valuables. I want proof of condition, proof of contents. Vivian walked through her own house like a stranger, watching the photographer document her life. The bedroom she'd shared with Adrian, the closet where his clothes hung next to hers, the bathroom where his toothbrush still sat in its holder. She went to his nightstand first, opened the drawer expecting nothing, found a receipt tucked under a stack of business cards. The Connaught Hotel, dated 2 weeks ago. £260 for a suite. Margaret, her voice was steady. I found something. Margaret appeared in the doorway, looked at the receipt, smiled that wolf smile again. Keep looking. They found more. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, a bracelet from Cartier that Vivian had never seen. Credit card statements showing purchases she'd never made. It was all there. A complete paper trail of his affair, hidden in drawers and jacket pockets like he'd never expected her to look. He's an idiot, Margaret said, photographing each item. They always are. They think they're so clever, but they get lazy, arrogant. The locksmith finished the front door, moved to the back entrance. New locks, new keys, new safety. The house was becoming hers again, bit by bit. They were in Adrian's office when Vivian found the file. It was buried in the back of his filing cabinet, behind tax returns and old bank statements. A manila folder labeled DV in his handwriting, inside divorce paperwork. Already filled out, already filed. Dated 3 weeks ago. He'd been planning this for at least a month, maybe longer. Vivian, Margaret's voice was careful. What does DV stand for? But Vivian was reading the paperwork, the proposal for asset division. He wanted the house sold and profit split. He wanted half her business. He wanted maintenance payments because she earned more than him. He wanted everything. Divorce, I imagine, Vivian said. Her voice sounded distant, clinical. He filed 3 weeks ago. He's been planning this whole time. Then he committed fraud. Margaret took the file, started photographing pages. Every penny he spent from joint accounts after filing these papers is evidence of asset dissipation. Every lie about his finances is perjury waiting to happen. Vivian sat down in Adrian's desk chair, looked around his office, the leather chair, the expensive desk, the artwork she'd helped him choose. I want him destroyed. Then we destroy him. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. That was fast. He's already called my office, demanding to know if I'm representing you. What did you tell him? Nothing, but he knows. Margaret sat on the edge of the desk, folded her arms. This is it, Vivian. Once I confirm I'm your attorney, this becomes real, official. There's no going back, no reconciling, no working it out. Good. Vivian met her eyes. I don't want to work it out. I want justice. Justice is expensive. So is my dignity, and he already stole £42,000 of my money. What's a little more for a good cause? Margaret smiled, pulled out her phone, and made a call. This is Margaret Chen calling for Adrian Hale. Please inform him that as of 10:45 this morning, I am officially retained as counsel for Vivian Hale in the matter of their divorce. All further communication should be directed through me, not my client. Any attempt to contact Mrs. Hale directly will be considered harassment and documented accordingly. She hung up. And now we wait for him to make his first mistake. They didn't have to wait long. Adrian's first mistake came through the letterbox at 2 in the afternoon. Vivian was still at the house with Margaret, going through files in the study, when she heard the metallic scrape of the mail slot. She walked to the front door expecting bills or catalogs, found instead a single white envelope with her name scrawled across the front in Adrian's handwriting. No address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Don't touch it, Margaret said, appearing behind her. Use gloves. You think there's anthrax in there? I think we document everything. Margaret pulled latex gloves from her bag. Of course she had latex gloves in her bag, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. Vivian, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but changing the locks on our home is illegal and I won't tolerate it. I'm giving you until 6 p.m. today to provide me with a new key. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. This is your only warning. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice. Margaret photographed it front and back, then placed it in a clear plastic sleeve. Threatening language, unreasonable demands, hand-delivered to circumvent the cease and desist. This is beautiful. Beautiful? He's already violating a legal order not to contact you. And he came here, to the house, which means we can document trespassing if he tries it again. She pulled out her phone, started typing. I'm going to respond on your behalf. Make it very clear that all communication goes through me. Then we're going to install cameras. Cameras? Front door, back door, driveway. I want footage if he comes back. Margaret looked up from her phone. He will come back, Vivian. Men like Adrian can't accept losing control. Right now he's panicking because nothing's going according to his plan. You were supposed to cry and beg. Instead, you've hired the most aggressive divorce attorney in London and locked him out of what he considers his house. He's going to escalate. How? Could be anything. Showing up unannounced, going through your finances, looking for leverage, trying to turn friends against you. Worst case, he gets physically aggressive again. Vivian thought about his hand on her wrist, the cold fury in his eyes. Should I be scared? You should be careful. There's a difference. Margaret finished her text, looked at Vivian seriously. But I also need you to know this is when most people give up. When it gets hard and messy and starts affecting your daily life. He's counting on you getting tired of fighting. Are you going to get tired? No. Even when he makes it personal, even when he drags your name through the mud. Especially then. Margaret's smile was sharp as a blade. Then let's make sure he knows exactly what he's dealing with. They spent the rest of the afternoon turning Vivian's house into a fortress. Security cameras went up at every entrance. Margaret had Vivian photograph every room, every valuable item, creating an inventory that would make it impossible for Adrian to claim he'd contributed more than he had. They documented the contents of his closet, his desk, his bedside drawer. Every receipt, every bank statement, every scrap of paper that might prove useful. At 4:30, Vivian's phone rang, an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message on speaker so Margaret could hear. Vivian, it's Adrian. I don't know why you're not answering, but this is getting ridiculous. I came by the house and my key doesn't work. I know you changed the locks. That's illegal, by the way. That house is as much mine as it is yours, and you can't just lock me out. Call me back so we can sort this out like adults. Or I'm getting the police involved. I'm serious, Viv. Don't make this harder than it has to be. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger, the kind that used to make Vivian nervous. Now it just sounded pathetic. He actually thinks the police will help him, Margaret said, almost amused. Men always think the police will help them. Will they? Not when I show them the deed to the house with your name on it, the domestic incident report from last night, and the cease and desist he's already violated twice. She saved the voicemail, added it to her growing file. Let him call them. It'll just give us more documentation. Vivian's phone buzzed again. A text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Lila. We need to talk. She showed it to Margaret, who raised an eyebrow. The girlfriend. Bold move. Should I respond? Absolutely not. But save it. Margaret leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms folded. She's testing the waters, seeing if she can manipulate you directly since Adrian's not having any luck. Don't give her the satisfaction. Another text. I know you're reading these. Adrian told me what you did. Locking him out of his own house? Really mature, Vivian. Then another. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. He just wants to be happy. Why can't you let him go? Vivian felt heat rising in her chest, the urge to respond, to defend herself. But Margaret was watching her with that cool attorney gaze, and she remembered what she'd said. Emotion is a luxury we can't afford. She's trying to bait you, Margaret said quietly. Don't take it. She's using my money to live on, and she has the nerve to tell me I'm immature? Of course she does. In her mind, you're the obstacle, the bitter ex-wife who won't accept reality. Margaret took the phone, screenshot the messages, handed it back. She probably believes her own story, that Adrian's some trapped hero and she's his salvation. It's easier than admitting she's a thief's accomplice. More texts flooded in. He says you're trying to take everything from him. That's vindictive and petty. I thought you were better than this. You had your chance with him and you blew it. Move on. At least respond. Don't be a coward. Vivian blocked the number with shaking hands. I want to destroy her too. We will, but not by engaging with her games. Margaret checked her watch. It's almost 6. He said that was your deadline, right? Let's see if he follows through. They didn't have to wait long. At 6:15, Vivian's phone rang again, Adrian's office number this time. Mrs. Hale? A woman's voice, professional and wary. This is Caroline from Hartwell and Sterling. I have Adrian Cross here, and he's asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent. Tell him to contact my attorney. He says he's already tried that, and then tell him to try harder. I'm not speaking to him directly. A pause, muffled conversation in the background. Then Caroline again, more uncomfortable now. He's saying you've locked him out of his house and stolen his belongings. Is that true? No, it's not true. The house is in my name, and all of his belongings are exactly where he left them. Vivian kept her voice calm, professional. As I said, any further communication needs to go through my attorney, Margaret Chen. If he continues to harass me through your office, I'll consider it workplace harassment and respond accordingly. More muffled conversation, then the line went dead. He's unraveling, Margaret said with satisfaction, calling from work, using colleagues to get to you. He's desperate. Good. They were packing up to leave when Vivian heard a car in the driveway. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. Adrian's silver Mercedes parked at an aggressive angle like he'd arrived in a hurry. He got out, slammed the door, and stormed toward the house. Don't answer it, Margaret said. I'm not. Adrian pounded on the door. Vivian, I know you're in there. Open the door. They stood in the hallway, silent, while he hammered away. Through the frosted glass panel, Vivian could see his outline, could hear the fury in every blow. This is my house, too. You can't just lock me out. Margaret pulled out her phone, started recording. Keep going, she murmured. Give me something I can use. I'm not leaving until you open this door, Vivian. I'm serious. We're going to settle this right now. More pounding, hard enough that the door rattled in its frame. Then his voice changed, went quieter, more dangerous. I know you're listening. I know Margaret Chen is in there with you, filling your head with nonsense. But you need to understand something. You can't win this. I have lawyers too, Vivian. Good ones. And when they're done with you, you're going to wish you'd been reasonable. Threatening language, Margaret whispered, still recording. Beautiful. You want to know why I left you? Adrian was shouting again now. Because you're cold, Vivian. You're a cold, frigid bitch who cares more about being right than being happy. Lila makes me feel alive. She makes me feel like a man. You just made me feel... He stopped. Vivian could see him through the glass, leaning against the doorframe, and for a moment she thought he might be crying. You just made me feel small, he said, quieter now. Every day. Every interaction. Like I was never good enough, never smart enough, never successful enough. Do you know what that's like? Living with someone who makes you feel worthless. Vivian felt something twist in her chest. Not guilt. She was done with guilt. But something close to pity. He actually believed what he was saying, had convinced himself that this was her fault, that his affair and theft were justified because she'd somehow failed him. I'm giving you one last chance, Adrian said, straightening up. Open this door, give me my key, and we can discuss the divorce like civilized people, or keep playing these games and see what happens. Your choice. Silence. Vivian counted to 10, then 20. On the other side of the door, she heard Adrian mutter something under his breath, heard his footsteps retreat to his car. The engine started, tires screeched, and he was gone. Margaret stopped recording, played it back to check the audio. That's usable. Threatening, emotionally abusive language, refusal to leave private property when asked. We add this to the assault at the restaurant, and we've got a pattern. He sounded broken. He sounded like a man who's never been told no before. Margaret saved the recording, backed it up to 3 different clouds. And now he's panicking because his victim isn't playing along. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Vivian. Are you ready for that? Vivian thought about the man she'd married 8 years ago, the one who'd seemed so confident and together. She tried to reconcile that memory with the one who just screamed at her through a locked door and couldn't find the connection. Maybe he'd always been this person. Maybe she'd just been too in love to see it. I'm ready. They left the house together, set the new alarm system, drove in separate cars back to Margaret's office. By the time they arrived, there were 6 more missed calls from Adrian's office number and 3 from numbers Vivian didn't recognize. Block them all, Margaret advised. He's trying to overwhelm you, make you so exhausted you'll give in just to make it stop. Don't let him. That night, back at Rebecca's house, Vivian lay in bed and listened to the sounds of a normal family. Rebecca and her husband talking in quiet voices downstairs. The kids fighting over whose turn it was to brush their teeth. The dog barking at something in the garden. Normal, boring, safe sounds. Her phone buzzed. Against her better judgment, she looked. Another unknown number. Another text. You're going to regret this. I promise you that. She blocked the number, turned off her phone, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, Margaret had said, they'd file their response to Adrian's divorce petition. Tomorrow they'd start building the case that would take back everything he'd stolen. Tomorrow, the real fight began. But tonight, she was just tired. She must have slept eventually because she woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee from downstairs. 6:30. She'd slept through the night for the first time in weeks and woke up feeling something she hadn't expected. Clarity. She showered, borrowed clothes from Rebecca, and was halfway through breakfast when her phone rang. Margaret, already at her office despite the early hour. We've got a problem. Vivian's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Adrian filed an emergency motion last night claiming you've locked him out of the marital home and are preventing him from accessing his belongings. He's asking for a court order forcing you to give him a key and unrestricted access to the property. Can he do that? He can try. We've got a hearing tomorrow morning at 10, which means we need to spend today building a defense. What do we need? Everything we documented yesterday, plus witness statements from anyone who saw the assault at the restaurant, plus medical documentation, plus proof that the house is yours and yours alone. Margaret's voice was crisp, efficient. Can you get to my office in an hour? I'll be there in 30 minutes. She was pulling on her coat when Rebecca came into the kitchen, took one look at her face and said, "What's he done now?" "He's trying to force his way back into my house." "Can he do that?" "That's what we're going to find out." Vivian grabbed her bag, kissed her sister on the cheek. "Thank you for letting me stay. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd figure it out. You always do." Rebecca walked her to the door, held it open. "But you don't have to figure it out alone. Remember that." The drive to Margaret's office took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Vivian spent it making lists in her head. Everyone who'd been at Lumiere that night, everyone who might have seen or heard what happened. It wasn't a long list. They'd been in a corner, relatively isolated. But the couple at the next table had definitely noticed, and the waiter had come over right after Adrian grabbed her wrist. Margaret's office was already full when Vivian arrived. 2 junior associates pulled from other cases, a private investigator named Danny, who specialized in financial fraud, and a paralegal who looked far too cheerful for 7 in the morning. "We've got 26 hours to build a case," Margaret announced, spreading files across the conference table. "Adrian's arguing that he has a right to access the marital home because he's lived there for 8 years and his belongings are inside. We're arguing that he has no legal claim to a property he never owned, never contributed to purchasing, and has actively threatened the owner of." "What about his belongings?" one of the associates asked. "We're not preventing him from getting his things. We're preventing him from having unsupervised access to Vivian's home. If he wants his clothes and his razor, we'll box them up and deliver them to whatever hotel he's staying at." Margaret looked at Vivian. "You're willing to return his belongings, correct?" "Of course, I don't want his things." "Good. That shows reasonableness on our part." She turned to Danny, the investigator. "What did you find?" Danny pulled out a tablet, swiped through screens. "Adrian Cross has been living at the Connaught for the past week, Suite 1712. He's been charging everything to a credit card that's maxed out. The hotel's getting nervous. He's also been making daily withdrawals from an ATM near Lila Mercer's flat in Kensington." "How much?" £200 a day, every day for the past 5 days. That's £1,000 in cash that we can't track, but I'd bet my license it's going straight to her." "Can we prove that?" "Not directly, but I've got photos of him going into her building, staying for hours, leaving early morning. If we can show a pattern of him spending marital assets on his mistress, it strengthens the case for asset dissipation." Margaret made notes, rapid and precise. "What about his job? How secure is it?" "Not very. I talked to a friend at Hartwell in Sterling, off the record obviously. Adrian's been under scrutiny for months. Missed deadlines, erratic behavior, unreliable performance. There's talk of putting him on a performance improvement plan." "Because of the affair?" "Because of the affair, the money troubles, the stress of maintaining 2 lives. He's falling apart, and his employers have noticed." Vivian felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. She'd spent 8 years supporting Adrian's career, listening to him complain about difficult clients and demanding bosses, helping him prepare for presentations. And he'd thrown it all away for a woman barely out of university who thought expensive dinners were love. "We can use that," Margaret said. If he's about to lose his income, he has even more incentive to take Vivian's money, which makes him more dangerous, not less. She looked at Vivian. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." "Really fine or pretending fine?" "Both, I think." Vivian sat down, accepted the coffee the paralegal handed her. "I keep waiting to feel sad about the marriage ending, but all I feel is angry. Anger's useful. Hold on to it." Margaret checked her watch. "Okay, we've got a lot to do. Vivian, I need you to go through your phone and pull up any threatening or harassing messages from Adrian or Lila. Every text, every voicemail, every call log. Then I need you to make a list of everyone who was at Lumiere 2 nights ago, staff included. We're going to track down witnesses." "What if they don't want to testify?" "Then we ask nicely. And if that doesn't work, we subpoena them." Margaret's smile was cold. "Nobody threatens my clients and gets away with it." They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Vivian pulled up months of text messages, voicemails, call logs, building a timeline of Adrian's increasing aggression. The shift had been subtle at first. A sharp comment here, an impatient text there. But over the past 6 months, as the affair intensified, he'd gotten meaner, more controlling, more willing to lash out when she questioned anything. She'd made excuses for all of it: stress at work, money worries, normal marriage friction. Now, looking at it all laid out chronologically, the pattern was obvious. He'd been pushing her away, creating distance, picking fights over nothing, preparing the ground for his exit. "This is good," Margaret said, reviewing the messages. "Really good. He's documenting his own abuse." One of the associates came back from Lumiere with news. "I talked to the maitre d'. He remembers the incident, says several staff members witnessed it. The waiter who served them is willing to give a statement. Get it in writing, today." By 6 that evening, they had witness statements from 3 restaurant employees, medical documentation of the wrist injury, a complete financial history showing Adrian's spending, and a timeline of his increasingly threatening behavior. Margaret laid it all out like pieces of a puzzle, each one fitting perfectly with the next. "This is what we're going to walk into court with tomorrow," she said, "and this is what we're going to say. Adrian Cross is a man who assaulted his wife in public, stole £42,000 from joint accounts to fund an affair, filed for divorce in secret while pretending to work on the marriage, and is now attempting to intimidate his victim into giving up her legal rights. He has no claim to her property, no right to access her home, and no grounds for sympathy. Will the judge agree? If they're not an idiot, yes." Margaret started packing up files, but we prepare for the worst. Adrian's lawyer is going to paint him as the wounded party, the devoted husband driven away by a cold, controlling wife. They'll say you changed the locks out of spite, that you're keeping his things hostage, that you're being unreasonable. How do we counter that? With the truth, and with the fact that you've offered, multiple times through counsel, to return his belongings. He's the one refusing to communicate through proper channels. He's the one making threats. He's the one who chose to assault you instead of having a civilized conversation. She looked at Vivian seriously. "Are you ready to sit in a courtroom and look at him while we lay all of this out?" Vivian thought about it, really thought about it, sitting across from Adrian, watching him try to play the victim while their marriage was dissected in front of strangers. It would be humiliating, painful, probably one of the hardest things she'd ever done. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." That night, Rebecca's husband David took the kids to his mother's house so Vivian and Rebecca could have the living room to themselves. They ordered takeaway, opened wine, and pretended to watch television while Vivian's mind raced through every possible outcome for tomorrow. "What if I lose?" she said finally. "You won't. But what if I do? What if the judge sides with him and gives him access to the house, and I'm stuck seeing him whenever he wants to show up?" Rebecca muted the television, turned to face her fully. "Then we deal with it. We change tactics. We appeal. We keep fighting. But you won't lose, Viv. You've got the law on your side. You've got evidence, and you've got the best attorney in London. He's got lies and theft and a girlfriend who texts like a teenager. She called me a coward." "Of course she did, because she's terrified you're going to take away her meal ticket." Rebecca poured more wine, handed Vivian a glass. "Women like that always go after the wife instead of the husband. It's easier to blame you for not keeping him happy than to admit they're with a man who steals from his own wife. Do you think she knows about the money? Probably. And if she doesn't, she's willfully blind. Rebecca curled up in the corner of the sofa, tucked her feet under her. Either way, she's complicit. You don't spend £42,000 of someone else's money without asking where it came from. Vivian's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She almost didn't look, but Rebecca reached over and grabbed it first. It's a photo, she said, frowning. Then her face went hard. Don't look at this. But Vivian had already seen a photo of Adrian and Lila, wrapped around each other in what looked like a hotel bed. Lila's face was turned toward the camera, smiling smugly. The message underneath, he's mine now. Let him go. Rebecca deleted it, blocked the number, and threw the phone across the room onto a cushioned chair. That bitch! Vivian felt something crack inside her chest. Not heartbreak. She was past that. Something angrier. Something that felt like pure crystalline rage. Screenshot it first. What? The photo. It's evidence. Of the affair, of her harassment, of everything. Bucky? Vivian retrieved the phone, found the photo in her deleted messages, screenshot it before the deletion was permanent. Margaret needs to see this. She sent it to Margaret with a single line. Lila's getting desperate. The response came back immediately. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. See you at court tomorrow, 9:30 sharp. Vivian slept badly that night, tossing in dreams where she stood in courtrooms that stretched on forever, where judges had Adrian's face, where she opened her mouth to speak and no sound came out. She woke at 5, gave up on sleep, and spent the dark hours before dawn going over everything Margaret had told her. Stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't volunteer information. Don't react to Adrian no matter what he says or does. At 8, she was dressed in a navy suit, professional, serious, nothing flashy. Rebecca drove her to the courthouse, waited with her in the lobby while lawyers and defendants and witnesses streamed past. At 9:20, Margaret appeared in a sharp gray suit that screamed competence and control. Ready? Ready. The courtroom was smaller than Vivian had expected, less formal. Plain wooden benches, a judge's bench that looked like it had seen better decades, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Adrian was already there with his attorney, a thin man in his 50s who had the pinched look of someone who dealt with unpleasant people for a living. Adrian looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes shadowed with lack of sleep. When he saw Vivian, something flickered across his expression. Hope, maybe, or calculation. Like he thought she might still break down, still give him what he wanted. She looked at him with nothing. No anger, no pity, no recognition, just blank professional distance, and watched him realize that whatever power he'd once had over her was gone. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the motions quickly, then looked up at both parties. Mr. Cross, you're asking for access to a property owned solely by your wife, is that correct? Adrian's lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client has resided at the property for 8 years of marriage and has personal belongings inside that he requires. Mrs. Hale has changed the locks and refused him entry. Mrs. Hale? The judge looked at Margaret. Margaret stood smoothly. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale has never refused to return Mr. Cross's belongings. She has, however, refused to give him unsupervised access to her private property, a property he has no legal claim to and which he has already threatened her regarding. We have documented evidence of domestic assault, financial theft, and ongoing harassment. That's a serious accusation, which is why we've come prepared to prove it. The judge gestured for her to continue. Margaret laid out the case methodically, piece by piece. The assault at the restaurant, witnessed by multiple staff members. The medical documentation, the £42,000 missing from joint accounts, the threatening messages and phone calls, Adrian's secret divorce filing while pretending to work on the marriage, the photo Lila had sent just last night. Adrian's lawyer tried to object to paint it as vindictive exaggeration, but the evidence was right there, time-stamped and documented and impossible to dismiss. Mr. Cross, the judge said when Margaret finished, do you deny assaulting your wife at a public restaurant? Adrian stood and Vivian could see him trying to find the right words, the right spin. Your Honor, my wife was causing a scene. I simply tried to calm her down. By grabbing her wrist hard enough to leave bruises? It wasn't like that. She's exaggerating. We have witness statements that say otherwise. The judge looked at the medical photos, then at Adrian with open distaste. And what about the 42,000 pounds? That was joint money. I had every right to spend it. On hotels and jewelry for your mistress? That's my personal business. Not when it's spent from marital accounts during divorce proceedings. It's not. The judge set down the file, folded her hands. Mr. Cross, I'm going to be very clear with you. You have no legal claim to a property you never owned. You have no right to access that property over the owner's objections. And your behavior over the past several days suggests you pose a potential threat to Mrs. Hale's safety and well-being. I would never hurt her. You already did. The judge turned to Vivian. Mrs. Hale, are you willing to return your husband's personal belongings? Vivian stood. Yes, Your Honor. I've always been willing to return them. I simply want to do so safely. Then here's my order. Mrs. Hale will arrange for Mr. Cross's belongings to be packed and delivered to an address of his choosing within 7 days. Mr. Cross will have no access to the property itself. If he needs to retrieve something personally, he may do so with Mrs. Hale's attorney present at a mutually agreed time. Any further contact between the parties will go through their respective attorneys. Mr. Cross, if you violate this order, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Adrian's face had gone white. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Motion denied. We're adjourned. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Vivian felt Rebecca's hand squeeze her shoulder. She'd been sitting in the gallery the whole time. Margaret was already packing up her files, looking satisfied. Adrian didn't move. He sat there staring at the table while his lawyer gathered papers and murmured something Vivian couldn't hear. Then he looked up, found her eyes across the courtroom, and she saw it clearly. He'd lost. Really lost. And he was only just beginning to understand what that meant. They were halfway down the courthouse steps when Adrian caught up with them. Vivian, wait. She kept walking. Margaret touched her elbow, a silent reminder to stay calm, stay controlled. Rebecca was on her other side, a wall of protective sister energy that radiated, don't you dare. Vivian, please, I just want to talk. Through your attorney, Margaret said without turning around, as the judge just ordered. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. His voice cracked, and Vivian hated that she recognized that sound, the one he used when he wanted sympathy, when he needed her to soften and forgive. Please. Vivian stopped, turned around. Adrian stood 3 steps above them, backlit by the weak morning sun, and for a moment he looked like the man she'd married, vulnerable, lost, almost human. You have something to say to my client? Margaret's voice could have cut glass. Adrian looked at Vivian, ignoring Margaret completely. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. The lawyer, the court, all of this. I thought we could work it out. You thought I'd just hand you my house and my money and disappear quietly. No, I thought... He ran a hand through his hair, that old nervous gesture she knew so well. I thought you'd understand, that we'd grown apart, that it wasn't working, that we'd both be happier moving on. Moving on with 42,000 pounds of my money? His jaw tightened. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The money. Not the marriage, not us, just the money. Vivian felt Rebecca shift beside her, ready to jump in, but she held up a hand. No, Adrian. This is about you lying to me for 6 months. This is about you stealing from accounts I built. This is about you filing for divorce while telling me everything was fine. This is about you grabbing my wrist in a restaurant because I wouldn't cry on command. The money is just evidence of what you are. What I am? Color was creeping up his neck now. You want to talk about what I am? I'm the one who stayed in a marriage that was dead for years. I'm the one who tried to make it work while you were married to your business. Too busy being successful to notice your husband was miserable. Then you should have left. Filed for divorce, moved out, been honest. But you didn't, because you wanted to keep living in my house, spending my money, while you figured out if Lila was a sure thing. That's not... He stopped, looked at Margaret and Rebecca, seemed to remember they had an audience. Can we please talk about this in private? No, Margaret said flatly. I wasn't asking you. Well, I'm answering anyway. You want to communicate with Mrs. Hale? You do it through me. Those are the rules, and you're going to follow them, or the next time we're in front of a judge, I'm asking for a restraining order. Adrian's lawyer appeared at the top of the steps, looking harried. "Adrian, we need to go. Now." But Adrian wasn't done. He took a step down, closing the distance between them, and Vivian saw Margaret's hand move to her phone. "You're making a mistake, Viv. You think you're punishing me, but you're just hurting yourself. The longer you drag this out, the more expensive it gets. For both of us. I can afford it. Can you?" Something nasty crept into his voice. "Because from where I'm standing, your little consulting business isn't exactly thriving. How many clients do you have right now? 3? 4? How long before they hear about this mess and decide you're too much drama? Is that a threat? It's reality? You want to destroy me? Fine. But you're going down too." Margaret stepped between them, physically blocking Adrian's view of Vivian. "This conversation is over. You have your court order. Follow it or face the consequences." Adrian looked at Margaret like he wanted to say something cutting, something that would hurt. But his lawyer was there now, hand on his arm, pulling him back. "Adrian, car, now." They watched him go, stalking across the courthouse plaza toward a waiting taxi. His lawyer followed, talking rapidly into his phone, probably already planning their next move. "Well," Rebecca said when they were gone, "he's taking that well." Vivian felt shaky, adrenaline draining out of her system. "He threatened my business." "He's scared," Margaret said. "He just lost in court. He's hemorrhaging money on hotels and his girlfriend, and he's starting to realize this isn't going to be the easy divorce he planned. So he's lashing out, trying to find leverage." "Will he go after my clients?" "He might try, but you haven't done anything wrong, and any client worth keeping will see through it." Margaret guided them toward her car. "What matters now is that we stay ahead of him. He's going to escalate, and we need to be ready." They drove back to Margaret's office in silence. Vivian stared out the window at London streaming past, gray and familiar and suddenly foreign. Everything looked the same as it had a week ago, but she felt like a different person, harder, colder, more willing to fight dirty because that's what survival required. At the office, Margaret's team was already assembled, ready for the next phase. Danny the investigator had more information about Adrian's finances, and none of it was good. "He's broke," Danny said, spreading out bank statements. "Not exaggerating, actually broke. His credit cards are maxed, his overdraft is at the limit, and his salary barely covers his hotel bill. He's been taking cash advances, payday loans, anything he can get his hands on." "How is he affording Lila's lifestyle?" "He's not anymore. The well ran dry about 2 weeks ago, right around when you noticed the missing money." Danny pulled up Instagram on his tablet, showed them Lila's recent posts. "Notice anything different?" Vivian looked. The photos from a month ago showed designer bags, expensive restaurants, luxury hotels. The recent ones were more carefully curated, expensive looking but generic. Coffee shops instead of champagne bars. Selfies instead of professional shots. "She's running out of money too." "Exactly. And when the money runs out, so does the fantasy." Danny swiped through more posts. "I'd give them 3 months before she starts looking for her next meal ticket." "Unless Adrian finds more money," Margaret said, "which is why he's so desperate to get access to Vivian's assets. It's not about the house or his belongings. It's about his survival." One of the junior associates raised her hand like she was in class. "What if he tries to force a sale of the house? Claim it's a marital asset even though it's in her name?" "He can try, but the law is pretty clear. Inherited property stays separate unless it's been substantially improved or commingled. Adrian's £5,000 contribution to a kitchen renovation 8 years ago isn't enough to establish a claim." Margaret looked at Vivian. "Your father was smart putting everything in your name alone." "He never trusted Adrian." Vivian said it quietly, remembering her father's careful questions before the wedding, his insistence on keeping the house separate. She'd thought he was being paranoid. Turned out he was being prescient. "Smart man." Margaret closed the files, looked around at her team. "Okay, here's what we're doing next. Danny, I want full financials on Lila Mercer. Where her money comes from, where it goes, any history of relationships with wealthy men. If there's a pattern, I want to know about it. On it. And I want surveillance on Adrian. Everywhere he goes, everyone he meets with. If he's planning something, I want advance warning." "Legal surveillance? Is there any other kind?" Margaret's smile was all teeth. "Vivian, you're going to go back to your house today with Rebecca and start packing Adrian's things. Document everything. Photographs, itemized lists, condition reports. I want a paper trail showing we've been reasonable and thorough. What about his office? He's got things at Hartwell and Sterling. Not our problem. He can collect those himself. Margaret checked her watch. We've got 7 days to get his belongings packed and delivered. I want it done in 3, before he has time to claim we're dragging our feet. They worked through lunch, planning and strategizing, turning Vivian's destroyed marriage into a tactical operation. It felt strange, reducing 8 years of shared life to evidence and leverage. But it also felt necessary. Adrian had turned their relationship into a transaction the moment he started stealing from her. She was just playing by the rules he'd established. By 2 that afternoon, Vivian and Rebecca were back at the house, armed with boxes and garbage bags and a detailed inventory system. They started in the bedroom, pulling Adrian's clothes from the closet, folding them with mechanical efficiency. These suits cost a fortune, Rebecca said, checking a label. Savile Row. Does he actually need this many? He likes looking successful. Vivian packed them carefully, despite everything. Image matters in finance. Image doesn't pay the rent. Rebecca moved to the dresser, started on socks and underwear. How are you really doing? And don't say fine. Vivian sat down on the bed, her bed, in her house, that would stay hers. I keep waiting to fall apart. Everyone expects me to, I think. The crying, the ice cream, the burning his stuff on the lawn. But I just feel empty. Like I used up all my sadness somewhere along the way, and there's nothing left. That's not emptiness. That's clarity. Is it? You're seeing him clearly for the first time in years. No love goggles, no excuses, no hoping he'll change, just the reality of who he is and what he did. Rebecca folded a shirt, added it to the box. That's not empty. That's awake. They worked in silence for a while, methodically dismantling Adrian's presence from the house. His books went into boxes, his toiletries into bags, his collection of cufflinks into bubble wrap. Each item was a small memory. This tie he'd worn to their anniversary dinner 2 years ago, this watch she'd given him for his birthday, this cologne that used to make her stomach flip when she smelled it. Now it all just smelled like lies. Vivian was packing his nightstand when she found another receipt, not for hotels or restaurants this time, for a jewelry store in Hatton Garden. £5,000 charged to his credit card 3 weeks ago. She checked the itemized list. An engagement ring. Rebecca. Her sister came over, looked at the receipt, went pale. He bought her a ring. While he was still married to me. While he was still sleeping in this bed. Vivian felt something hot and sharp behind her ribs, but her hand stayed steady. He was planning to propose. That absolute cheat. Rebecca grabbed the receipt, took photos from every angle. Margaret needs to see this. Vivian sent the images with shaking hands. The response came back within minutes. Perfect. This proves intent to continue the relationship and further asset dissipation. Keep looking. They found more. Love letters from Lila, printed out and tucked into his desk drawer. Plans for a vacation to Santorini, booked for next month. A lease agreement for a flat in Kensington. Adrian and Lila's names both on it, signed 2 weeks ago. He was going to move in with her, Vivian said, reading the lease. He had it all planned out. Leave me. Marry Lila. Start over. With your money. With my money. She photographed the lease, added it to the growing evidence file. Every piece of paper she found was another nail in Adrian's coffin, another proof that this wasn't a sudden decision or a mistake. It was calculated. Methodical. Cold. By evening, they had 10 boxes packed and a complete inventory of everything that belonged to Adrian. Clothes, books, electronics, personal papers, all of it documented, photographed, ready for delivery. Vivian called the storage company Margaret had recommended, arranged for pickup the next morning. Where should we send it? The dispatcher asked. Vivian gave them the address of the Connaught, Suite 1712. Let Adrian explain to hotel management why he was receiving 10 boxes of belongings. Let him deal with the logistics and the cost and the embarrassment. That night, back at Rebecca's house, Vivian's phone started ringing. Adrian's lawyer calling to negotiate. She sent him to voicemail, forwarded the message to Margaret, and blocked the number. 2 minutes later, a different number called. She blocked that too. Then texts started coming in from numbers she didn't recognize but knew were Adrian. You're being ridiculous. I need my things. This is harassment. I could sue you for this. Fine, keep playing games. See where it gets you. She blocked each number as it appeared, a game of whack-a-mole that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Margaret had warned her this would happen. The extinction burst, she'd called it. When someone loses control, they fight harder before they accept defeat. But Vivian was done fighting. She was just watching Adrian destroy himself, one desperate move at a time. The next morning, the storage company picked up Adrian's boxes. By noon, Margaret received an angry email from Adrian's lawyer claiming they'd stolen his client's property. By 1, they had security footage from the Connaught showing Adrian signing for the delivery himself. "He's flailing," Margaret said over the phone. "This is good. Keep letting him flail." But that afternoon, things took a darker turn. Vivian was at a coffee shop near her office, meeting with a potential client, when a woman approached their table. Blonde, young, wearing sunglasses indoors. It took Vivian a moment to recognize her from Instagram photos. Lila Mercer. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Lila said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But I saw you sitting here and I thought we should finally meet properly, woman to woman." The client looked confused. Vivian felt her stomach drop. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Oh, I disagree. I think we have a lot to discuss." Lila pulled out a chair, sat down without being invited. "Like how you're making Adrian's life hell because you can't accept that he's moved on." "I'm in a meeting." "This will just take a minute." Lila smiled at the client, all charm. "You don't mind, do you? This is important." The client, a nervous woman in her 40s who'd been interested in hiring Vivian for brand consulting, looked between them uncertainly. "Maybe I should—" "No, please stay," Vivian said, her voice level despite her racing heart. "This woman is leaving. This woman has a name, Lila, and I'm not leaving until you hear what I have to say." Lila leaned forward, dropping the sweet act. "You need to stop this vindictive campaign. Drop the lawyers, give Adrian what he's entitled to, and move on with your life. He's entitled to nothing. He lived in that house for 8 years. He contributed to the marriage. He deserves fair compensation. He stole 42,000 pounds. Lila waved a hand dismissively. "That's his money too. You just want to punish him for falling in love with someone else." The client was gathering her things, clearly uncomfortable. Vivian felt the meeting slipping away, felt her professional reputation crumbling in real time. "Please leave. Now." "Or what? You'll call the police? Go ahead. I'd love to tell them how you're harassing Adrian, turning his life upside down because you're jealous." Lila's voice was getting louder, drawing attention from other tables. "He told me what you're really like. Controlling, manipulative, cold. He said living with you was like living in a prison." "I'm calling security." Vivian pulled out her phone, but Lila grabbed her wrist, the same wrist Adrian had grabbed, and for a moment Vivian was back in that restaurant feeling the same helpless fury. But she wasn't helpless anymore. Vivian yanked her arm free, stood up, and spoke loud enough for everyone in the coffee shop to hear. "Get your hands off me. I don't know you, I didn't invite you here, and you need to leave. Now." The barista was already coming over, phone in hand. "Is there a problem?" "This woman is harassing me," Vivian said clearly. "I've asked her to leave, and she's refused. I'd like you to call the police." Lila's face went white, then red. "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just trying to have a conversation." "By grabbing my wrist and disrupting my business meeting?" Vivian turned to the client, who was watching wide-eyed. "I apologize for this. This is my ex-husband's girlfriend, and she's been stalking me for days." "I'm not stalking." "You found out where I was, came here uninvited, sat down without permission, and physically grabbed me when I tried to leave. What would you call that?" The barista had his phone out now, filming. Other customers were doing the same. Lila seemed to realize suddenly that this wasn't going the way she'd planned, that she was the one looking unhinged in front of an audience. "Fine." She stood up, grabbed her bag. "But this isn't over, Vivian. Adrian's going to get what he deserves, and you're going to lose everything." "Funny," Vivian said quietly. "He said the same thing. How's that working out for him?" Lila left in a storm of designer perfume and barely contained rage. The client left 30 seconds later with an apologetic mumble about needing to think about things. And Vivian sat there in the sudden quiet, hands shaking, while the barista brought her a free coffee and asked if she was okay. She wasn't okay. She was furious and humiliated and tired of being ambushed by people who thought they could intimidate her into submission. But she was also vindicated, because half the coffee shop had just witnessed Lila Mercer assault her in public. She called Margaret from the bathroom, voice tight. "Lila just attacked me at a coffee shop. There are witnesses and video." "Are you hurt?" No, but she grabbed my wrist, disrupted a client meeting, and made threats. She's escalating. Good. Margaret's voice was calm, calculating. Send me the location. I'll have Danny collect witness statements and get copies of the security footage. This is exactly what we need. My client left, Margaret. She was scared off by this mess. Then she wasn't the right client. Anyone who runs at the first sign of drama isn't worth having. A pause. Are you really okay, Vivian? I'm tired of being everyone's punching bag. Then we hit back. Harder. I'm filing for a restraining order against Lila Mercer, and I'm adding today's incident to our evidence of harassment. By the end of the week, neither she nor Adrian will be able to come within 100 meters of you. Vivian leaned against the bathroom wall, closed her eyes, and tried to remember who she'd been a week ago. A woman who made excuses for her husband's bad behavior. A woman who stayed quiet to avoid conflict. A woman who let people walk all over her because she didn't want to make waves. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd learned that sometimes making waves was the only way to survive. She went back to the coffee shop, thanked the barista for his help, and gave him Margaret's card in case the police needed statements. Then she went home, to her house, with her new locks and her security cameras, and started planning her next move. Because Adrian and Lila weren't the only ones who could escalate. That evening, Margaret sent through preliminary paperwork for the restraining order. It detailed every threatening message, every harassment incident, every time Adrian or Lila had violated Vivian's boundaries. Reading it was like watching her life compressed into legal language, reduced to facts and dates and exhibits. But it was also empowering. Because on paper, in black and white, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a messy divorce between two people who couldn't make it work. This was systematic abuse, financial theft, and coordinated harassment. And the law had remedies for that. Rebecca came by that evening with takeaway and wine and a determination to make Vivian talk about something other than the divorce. They ate pad thai on the sofa and watched terrible reality television, and for an hour, Vivian almost felt normal. Then her phone rang. An unknown number which she normally would have ignored, but something made her answer. Mrs. Hale? A man's voice, professional and wary. This is Simon Hartwell from Hartwell and Sterling. I'm Adrian Cross's supervisor. Vivian sat up straighter, waved at Rebecca to mute the TV. Yes? I apologize for calling you directly, but I felt you should know. We've received some concerning information about Adrian's conduct, both professional and personal. I was hoping we could discuss it off the record. What kind of information? The kind that suggests he's been misusing company resources and engaging in behavior that reflects poorly on the firm. A pause. I'd rather not discuss specifics over the phone. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? Vivian looked at Rebecca, who was listening with obvious curiosity. Can I bring my attorney? I'd prefer if you didn't. This is an informal conversation, not a legal matter. At least not yet. Then I'll need to record it. That's understandable. Tomorrow at 10? There's a cafe near our offices, Granger's on Bishopsgate. I'll be there. She hung up, immediately called Margaret, and relayed the conversation. Don't go, Margaret said flatly. It's a trap. What if it's not? What if Adrian really has been doing something at work and they want to know about it? Then they can request information through proper legal channels. This off-the-record meeting at a cafe nonsense is designed to get you talking without protection. Margaret sighed. But you're going anyway, aren't you? With my phone recording every word. Fine, but I'm sending Danny to sit at a nearby table as backup, and if anything feels off, you walk out immediately. The next morning, Vivian arrived at Granger's 15 minutes early. It was a sleek place, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, full of finance types having power breakfasts. Danny was already there, reading a newspaper at a corner table, looking like any other businessman starting his day. Simon Hartwell arrived exactly on time. He was in his late 50s, expensive suit, thinning hair, the kind of man who'd spent his entire life in banking and looked like it. He ordered tea with the careful precision of someone who took rituals seriously. Thank you for meeting me, he said once they were settled. I know this is unusual. You said there were concerns about Adrian. Yes. He added milk to his tea, stirred methodically. Adrian has worked for Hartwell and Sterling for 6 years. Until recently, his performance was adequate. Not exceptional, but adequate. However, over the past several months, we've noticed irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Missed deadlines, poor client management, unusual expense claims. We initially attributed it to personal stress, but then we started getting complaints from clients, from colleagues, from support staff. He looked at her directly. One of our analysts came forward yesterday with allegations that Adrian has been using company credit cards for personal expenses. Significant personal expenses. Vivian's heart rate picked up. How significant? We're still investigating, but preliminary findings suggest upwards of £20,000 over the past 4 months. Hotels, restaurants, retail purchases, none of it work-related. And you're telling me this because? Because Adrian's listed you as his emergency contact. Because we need to understand whether this is a personal crisis or something more serious. And because, he paused, chose his words carefully. Because we've heard about your divorce proceedings, and we need to know if this is going to become a legal matter that impacts the firm. Vivian pulled out her phone, made a show of placing it on the table. I'm recording this conversation for my protection and yours. I understand. Adrian has been having an affair with a woman named Lila Mercer. He's been funding that affair with money stolen from our joint accounts, approximately £42,000 that I can prove. If he's also been using company cards, that's between him and your firm. I have nothing to do with his professional conduct. Has he made any statements to you about financial difficulties at work? Adrian hasn't made any statements to me about anything. We're not in contact except through our attorneys. She leaned forward slightly. But if you're asking whether he's desperate enough to steal from his employer, the answer is yes. He's broke, he's supporting an expensive girlfriend, and he's trying to maintain a lifestyle he can't afford. So yes, I'd absolutely believe he'd use company cards for personal expenses. Simon made notes on a small pad, his face carefully neutral. Would you be willing to provide documentation of the money he took from your joint accounts? Through my attorney, yes. But I want to know why you're really asking. He set down his pen, met her eyes. Because we're preparing to terminate Adrian's employment, and we want to make sure we have all the facts before we do. If he's stolen from the company, we'll pursue legal action, but we need to build an airtight case. You want my evidence to support your case against him. I want to make sure a man who's demonstrated a pattern of theft doesn't get away with it, don't you? Vivian thought about it. About Adrian losing his job on top of everything else. About him being completely destroyed, not just divorced, but unemployed and possibly facing criminal charges. A week ago, the thought would have made her feel guilty. Now it just felt like justice. I'll have my attorney send over what we have, but I want it on record that I'm cooperating voluntarily, not because I owe your firm anything. Understood. Simon finished his tea, left cash on the table for both of them. I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Hale, and I'm sorry you've been put through this. So am I. He left, and Vivian sat there for a long moment before Danny came over and slid into the vacated seat. That was interesting, he said. You heard? I heard enough. He's building a case against Adrian, and he wants your ammunition. Danny pulled out his phone, showed her photos he'd taken of Simon entering and leaving. Question is, do you give it to him? Margaret will know what to do. They left separately, Vivian walking to clear her head before calling Margaret. The streets were busy with morning commuters, everyone rushing to jobs and meetings and lives that weren't falling apart. She felt disconnected from all of it, like she was watching from behind glass. When she finally called, Margaret listened to the whole story without interrupting. This is good, she said when Vivian finished. Very good. If Adrian's fired for theft, it impacts the divorce settlement. He can't claim he needs maintenance or that he deserves assets when he's unemployed due to his own criminal behavior. So we cooperate? We cooperate strategically. I'll provide Simon Hartwell with limited documentation, enough to support their investigation, but not so much that we show our full hand, and we make it clear that we're doing this as a courtesy, not an obligation. Will Adrian find out we helped? Eventually, probably. Does that bother you? Vivian thought about Adrian's face in court, about his threats outside the courthouse, about Lila grabbing her wrist in that coffee shop. No, not even a little bit. Good. Because we're entering the end game now, Vivian. The restraining order hearing is in 3 days. Adrian's likely to be fired within the week. Lila's going to realize her meal ticket is gone and start looking for an exit. Everything's going to happen very fast. I'm ready. Are you? Because once Adrian loses his job, he's going to have nothing to lose. And people with nothing to lose do dangerous things. Vivian looked around at the London streets, at the city she'd lived in for a decade, and felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, not anymore. Just a cold, clear determination to finish what she'd started. Then we'll deal with it. Whatever he does, we'll deal with it. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You've changed. Yes. Good. The old Vivian wouldn't have survived this. The new one might actually win. That night, Vivian stayed in her own house for the first time since the dinner at Lumiere. She walked through empty rooms that echoed without Adrian's presence, sat in silence that felt more peaceful than lonely. The house was hers again. Really hers. Not a marital home or a shared asset, just hers. She made dinner, drank wine, and went to bed early. And for the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking. But the calm wouldn't last. Because 3 days later, the restraining order hearing arrived, and with it, the moment when Adrian finally realized he'd lost everything that mattered. The restraining order hearing fell on a Thursday morning, gray and cold enough that Vivian could see her breath when she stepped out of Rebecca's car. They'd driven together in silence, Rebecca's hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze hers, a wordless reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Margaret was waiting outside the courthouse, flanked by her junior associates, all of them dressed like they were going into battle. Which Vivian supposed they were. How are you feeling? Margaret asked. Like I'm about to watch my life get dissected in front of strangers. Again. Good. Channel that. Margaret handed her a folder. This is everything we're presenting today. The assault at the restaurant, the threatening messages, the incident at the coffee shop with Lila. The judge is going to ask you direct questions. Answer honestly, don't embellish, and don't let Adrian or his lawyer bait you into losing your temper. Well, what about Lila? Will she be here? She was served with notice, so she should be. Whether she shows up is another question. Margaret checked her watch. We've got 15 minutes. Let's go over your testimony one more time. They found a quiet corner and rehearsed. What happened at Lumiere, how Adrian had grabbed her wrist, the exact words he'd used. The phone calls and texts that had followed. Lila's confrontation at the coffee shop, the witnesses who'd seen it, the video footage the barista had provided. Each incident was a brushstroke in a larger picture, and Margaret was determined to make that picture crystal clear. Adrian arrived 10 minutes before the hearing, looking worse than Vivian had ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. He was alone, no lawyer in sight. Where's his attorney? Vivian whispered to Margaret. Probably dropped him. Clients who can't pay tend to lose representation quickly. Margaret's expression didn't change, but Vivian could hear the satisfaction in her voice. This is going to be easier than I thought. They filed into the courtroom, smaller and more cramped than the last one. The same judge from the property hearing presided, and she looked at Adrian with open disapproval when she realized he was representing himself. Mr. Cross, where is your counsel? Adrian stood, and Vivian could see his hand shaking. I'm representing myself today, Your Honor. I couldn't afford, that is, I felt it was better to speak for myself. This is a serious matter. You understand that Mrs. Hale is requesting a restraining order against both you and Miss Mercer. Yes, Your Honor, and I think it's completely unwarranted. I'm the victim here, not her. The judge's eyebrows rose. We'll see about that. Mrs. Chen, you may present your case. Margaret stood, and for the next 20 minutes she methodically laid out every piece of evidence they'd collected. The restaurant assault, complete with witness statements from 3 staff members. The threatening messages, played aloud in Adrian's own voice. The midnight visits to Vivian's house, captured on security cameras. Lila's harassment at the coffee shop, corroborated by multiple witnesses and video footage. By the time she finished, Adrian looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Mr. Cross, the judge said, do you dispute any of these allegations? Some of them are exaggerated, Your Honor. The restaurant incident, for example. I barely touched her wrist. She was making a scene and I was trying to calm her down. Multiple witnesses say you grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises. Are they all lying? They misunderstood the situation. And the threatening phone calls? I was upset. I'd just been locked out of my own home. I wasn't thinking clearly. It's not your home, Mr. Cross. We established that in our previous hearing. The judge looked at the file in front of her. What about the £42,000 you withdrew from joint accounts without your wife's knowledge or consent? Adrian's jaw worked. That was my money too. Was it? Or was it money from Mrs.? Hale's inheritance and business earnings that you helped yourself to while planning to divorce her? The judge leaned back. I'm looking at bank records here that show you withdrew or spent over £2,000 a week for 6 months. Where did that money go? Personal expenses? Hotels where you stayed with your mistress? Jewelry you bought for your mistress? Restaurants where you took your mistress? The judge's voice was sharp as a whip. That's not personal expenses, Mr. Cross. That's theft. I had a right to live my life. Not with her money, you didn't. The judge turned to Vivian. Mrs. Hale, I'd like to hear from you directly. In your own words, why are you requesting this restraining order? Vivian stood on shaking legs. This was it, the moment to tell her truth in front of the man who'd tried to erase it. Because I'm afraid of what he'll do next, Your Honor. Adrian doesn't accept that our marriage is over. He doesn't accept that the house is mine, that the money he stole needs to be returned, that he can't just take what he wants anymore. Every time a court rules against him, he escalates. He threatens me, he shows up at my house. He has his girlfriend harass me in public. I don't know what he's capable of, but I know I don't feel safe, and I shouldn't have to feel unsafe in my own life. Have you had direct contact with Ms. Mercer beyond the coffee shop incident? She sent me threatening text messages. She's posted about me on social media, making accusations that I'm vindictive and cruel. She sent me a photo of her and Adrian in bed together with a message telling me to let him go. Vivian's voice stayed steady despite the humiliation of saying this aloud. She's not just his girlfriend, she's his accomplice. And Ms. Mercer is not here today to defend herself. The judge made a note, which speaks volumes. Mr. Cross, where is Miss Mercer? I don't know, Your Honor. We've been having some difficulties. Difficulties? Adrian's face flushed. She left 3 days ago. Said she couldn't deal with the stress anymore. A ripple went through the courtroom. Even Margaret looked surprised, though she recovered quickly. Vivian felt something between vindication and pity. So Danny had been right. The money dried up, and Lila disappeared. How predictable. So the woman you destroyed your marriage for has abandoned you. The judge didn't sound sympathetic. And now you're alone, unemployed. Yes, Mr. Cross, I've been informed about your termination from Hartwell and Sterling and facing multiple legal battles. Do you understand how serious your situation is? I lost my job because of her. Adrian pointed at Vivian, his voice rising. She went to my employer, fed them lies about me, got me fired out of spite. I didn't go to anyone, Vivian said quietly. Your employer came to me because they discovered you'd been stealing from them too. £20,000 in company credit card fraud, I believe. Adrian's face went white. I can explain that. I'm sure you can, but that's a matter for criminal court, not this one. The judge closed the file, folded her hands. Here's what I'm going to order. Effective immediately, Mr. Cross, you are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Hale directly or indirectly. No phone calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at her home or place of business. All communication will go through her attorney. You are to stay at least 100 meters away from her at all times. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and held in contempt. Your Honor, I'm not finished. You are also ordered to return the £42,000 you withdrew from joint accounts within 90 days. If you cannot pay in full, we'll arrange a payment plan, but the debt is non-negotiable. As for Ms. Mercer, since she failed to appear today, I'm issuing the restraining order in absentia. Same terms. No contact, 100 meters distance. I don't even know where she is. Then you won't have any trouble staying away from her, will you? The judge signed the order with decisive strokes. Mrs. This court recognizes that you have been the victim of domestic abuse, financial theft, and ongoing harassment. These orders are designed to protect you while the divorce proceedings continue. If Mr. Cross or Miss Mercer violate them in any way, contact the police immediately. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. You've still got a long road ahead. The judge looked at Adrian with something like disgust. Mr. Cross, I suggest you get your life together. Find a job, find a lawyer, and find some integrity, because the way you've conducted yourself is shameful. We're adjourned. The gavel came down, and it was over. Vivian felt Rebecca's arm around her shoulders, felt Margaret's hand squeeze her elbow in congratulations. But she couldn't stop looking at Adrian, slumped in his chair like all the air had gone out of him. He'd lost everything. Job, girlfriend, money, dignity. And the worst part was, he'd done it all to himself. They filed out of the courtroom into weak autumn sunlight. Margaret was already on her phone calling her office with updates. Rebecca was talking about celebratory lunch, but Vivian just felt tired, like she'd been running for miles and only now realized she could stop. Vivian. She turned. Adrian was standing a careful 100 meters away at the edge of the courthouse plaza. He looked small from that distance, defeated in a way she'd never seen him. "Don't," Margaret said. "Don't engage." "I'm not going to. Vivian took a breath. "I just want to look at him. Really look at him." She studied the man she'd loved for 9 years, married for 8, tried to find the person she'd fallen for in that gallery all those years ago. The charming, confident man who'd made her laugh, who'd promised her forever, who'd stood at an altar and vowed to love her in sickness and health, for better or worse. He wasn't there. Maybe he'd never been there. Maybe she'd just wanted him to be. Adrian raised his hand, a small gesture that might have been hello or goodbye or apology. Vivian didn't wave back. She just turned around and walked away, Rebecca and Margaret flanking her like bodyguards, and didn't look back. They had lunch at a wine bar in Soho, the 3 of them tucked into a corner booth. Margaret ordered champagne despite Vivian's protests, insisting that victories had to be celebrated even when they felt hollow. "What happens now?" Vivian asked, picking at a salad she had no appetite for. "Now we wait for his next move. He's got 90 days to return the money. He'll probably file for bankruptcy, claim he can't pay." Margaret cut into her steak with surgical precision. "We fight that, we prove he can work and earn, and we make him pay back every penny, even if it takes years. What if he just disappears, leaves the country? With what money? He's broke, unemployed, and now has a court order hanging over his head. Plus, we've already flagged his passport with the court. If he tries to leave the UK, we'll know." Rebecca poured more champagne, raised her glass. "To Adrian Cross, officially the most pathetic man in London." Vivian couldn't help but smile. "That's mean." "He earned it." Rebecca clinked glasses with her. "And to you for being a badass who didn't let him win." "I haven't won yet. The divorce still has to be finalized." "Details." Margaret waved a hand. "The hard part's over. He has no leverage, no money, no credibility. The divorce is just paperwork at this point. We file, he signs, it's done." "What about his claim to the house?" "Dead in the water. The house is yours, provably yours, and he has no legal grounds to claim otherwise. The $5,000 he contributed to the kitchen renovation 8 years ago doesn't establish ownership." Margaret pulled out her tablet, started making notes. "I'll file the final divorce petition next week. If Adrian wants to contest it, he'll need a lawyer, and good luck finding one who'll take him on credit." Vivian should have felt relieved, should have felt victorious, but all she felt was exhausted, like her bones were made of lead. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think I'm vindictive?" "Lila said I was being vindictive, and Adrian thinks I'm trying to destroy him out of spite. Am I?" Margaret set down her fork, looked at Vivian with the same serious expression she used in courtrooms. "You want the truth?" "Always." "Then yes, you're being vindictive. You're going after him with everything you've got, using the legal system to punish him for what he did. But here's the thing, you're entitled to be vindictive. He stole from you, he abused you, he tried to take your home. Vindictive is the appropriate response to that. Anyone who says otherwise is either naive or complicit." "I just don't want to become the kind of person who destroys people for revenge." "You're not destroying him for revenge. You're holding him accountable for his actions. There's a difference." Margaret leaned forward. "Listen to me. Women are taught that anger is unbecoming, that we should be forgiving and understanding even when we're the victims. That standing up for ourselves makes us difficult or bitter or vindictive. It's garbage. All of it. You have every right to be angry, every right to demand justice, and every right to make sure he pays for what he did. That's not vindictive. That's self-respect." Rebecca raised her glass again. "What she said." They finished lunch and parted ways, Margaret heading back to her office, Rebecca taking Vivian home. But when they pulled up to the house, there was someone sitting on the front steps. Not Adrian. The restraining order was too fresh for him to be that stupid. A man Vivian didn't recognize, mid-40s maybe, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He stood when he saw them, raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Mrs. Hale, I'm sorry to show up unannounced. My name is Nolan Pierce. I'm a friend of your father's. Vivian's father had been dead for 5 years. What do you want? Just to talk. About your father, and about something he asked me to do a long time ago. Nolan pulled out a business card, handed it to Rebecca when Vivian didn't take it. I'm an estate attorney. Your father retained me shortly before he passed, asked me to keep an eye on certain things. I think it's time we talked about them. Vivian looked at Rebecca, who shrugged. You want me to stay? Please. They went inside, Vivian keeping space between herself and this stranger who claimed to know her father. Nolan sat in the living room, declining tea, looking around the house with obvious familiarity. I was here once before, he said. Your father invited me over when he first bought this place. He was so proud of it, so determined to make sure it stayed in the family. He looked at Vivian. He knew, about Adrian. What? Not the specifics, but he knew the kind of man your husband was. A user. Someone who'd take and never give back. Nolan pulled a folder from his bag. That's why he structured your inheritance the way he did. The house in your name only, money and trust that Adrian couldn't access, provisions that protected you even in divorce. Vivian felt her throat tighten. He never said anything. He didn't want to interfere. You loved Adrian and your father respected that, but he also wanted to make sure you'd be protected if things went wrong. Nolan opened the folder, showed her documents she'd never seen. He also set up something else, a fund, separate from your inheritance that was to be released only under specific circumstances. What circumstances? Divorce initiated by Adrian or evidence of infidelity or financial abuse. Any of those triggers, and the fund becomes accessible to you. He handed her a bank statement. There's £150,000 waiting for you, Vivian. Your father wanted to make sure you'd have the resources to fight back if you needed to. Vivian stared at the number, feeling tears prick her eyes for the first time in weeks. Her father, gone 5 years, still protecting her, still believing in her. I didn't know. He made me promise not to tell you unless it was necessary. He hoped it never would be. Nolan's expression softened, but he also told me that if the day came, I was to tell you something. He said, tell my daughter she's stronger than she knows, and she deserves better than settling for less. The tears came then, hot and sudden, and impossible to stop. Rebecca was there immediately, arms around her, holding her while she cried for her father and for her marriage and for the years she'd wasted on a man who'd never deserved her. He was a good man, Nolan said quietly, and he raised a good daughter. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I'm glad I could finally give you what he wanted you to have. They talked for another hour, Nolan explaining the fund structure and how to access it. It was unconditional money, no strings attached, designed purely to give Vivian security and freedom. By the time he left, she had access to resources that changed everything. £150,000, Rebecca said when they were alone. That's substantial. It's a safety net I didn't know I had. Vivian looked at the documents spread across the coffee table. Adrian thought he could bankrupt me, wear me down until I gave up. He had no idea. Nobody did. Your father was smart, keeping this secret. He was protecting me even from myself, from my own bad judgment. Vivian wiped her eyes, felt something shift inside her. I could pay Margaret's fees in full. I could take months off work if I needed to, not worry about clients. You could do whatever you want. That's the point. Rebecca squeezed her hand. What do you want? Vivian thought about it, really thought about it. A week ago, she would have said she wanted her marriage back, wanted things to go back to normal. But normal had been a lie, and her marriage had been a prison she'd been too comfortable in to recognize. I want to finish this, she said finally. I want the divorce finalized, Adrian out of my life permanently, and every penny he stole returned. And then I want to build something new, something that's completely mine. Then that's what we'll do. That night, Vivian sat in her father's study, surrounded by his books and the smell of old leather. She found the photo she was looking for tucked into a frame on his desk. Her at her wedding, smiling in white lace, her father beside her in his suit. He wasn't smiling in the photo. She thought it was just his usual serious expression, but now she wondered if he'd known even then that she was making a mistake. I wish you'd told me, she said to the photo. I wish you'd said something. But of course he couldn't have. She'd been in love, or thought she was, and nothing he said would have changed her mind. She had to learn this lesson herself, the hard way, through heartbreak and theft, and the slow realization that love wasn't enough when it was one-sided. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I heard about the restraining order. Congratulations on ruining his life. Lila, apparently still bitter, even from wherever she'd run off to. Vivian blocked the number without responding, then called Margaret to report it. She's violating the order already, Margaret said, sounding pleased. Screenshot everything, forward it to me. If she keeps this up, we'll have her arrested. She's not worth it. Maybe not, but compliance is. Margaret paused. How are you doing? Really? Better than I expected. Tired, but better. Vivian looked around the study, at the life her father had built. My father left me money. A lot of it. Enough to see this through without compromise. Smart man. The smartest. He knew what Adrian was before I did. Fathers usually do. Margaret's voice gentled slightly. Get some rest, Vivian. Tomorrow we start building your new life. Tonight, just breathe. Vivian did. She breathed and she rested, and for the first time in 9 years she slept in a house that was completely hers without a single part of her wishing someone else was there. The next week passed in a blur of legal filings and financial audits. Margaret filed the final divorce petition, requesting full dissolution of the marriage, return of all stolen funds, and a complete separation of any remaining assets. Adrian had 14 days to respond. He responded in 11 through a court-appointed lawyer who looked exhausted before the meeting even started. They met in Margaret's conference room, Vivian on one side of the table, Adrian and his attorney on the other. Adrian looked worse than he had at the restraining order hearing, thinner, older, like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. He didn't meet Vivian's eyes when he sat down. My client is prepared to accept the divorce terms, his lawyer said, sliding papers across the table, in exchange for a reduced repayment schedule on the £42,000 and dismissal of any criminal complaints. Margaret didn't even look at the papers. No. No? Your client stole £42,000, assaulted my client in public, harassed her repeatedly, and committed credit card fraud against his employer. We're not negotiating reduced anything. Mr. Cross is currently unemployed with no prospects. He can't pay back that amount. Then he should have thought of that before stealing it. Margaret leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Cross will accept the divorce terms as written. He will agree to a payment plan for the full £42,000 with interest, and he will sign a non-disparagement agreement preventing him from speaking publicly about my client or their marriage. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges for the theft from joint accounts. That's completely unreasonable. No, what's unreasonable is your client expecting mercy after what he's done. Margaret turned to Adrian directly. You wanted out of this marriage. Fine. But you don't get to leave with her money, her dignity, or her peace of mind. You get to leave with nothing but the consequences of your own actions. Adrian finally looked up, met Vivian's eyes across the table. Is that really what you want? To destroy me completely? Vivian had thought about this moment, about what she'd say when she finally had the chance to tell Adrian exactly how she felt. All the speeches she'd rehearsed, all the accusations she'd wanted to hurl. But sitting there, looking at him, she realized she didn't have anything to say. He wasn't worth her words anymore. I don't want to destroy you, Adrian. I just want you gone. Something flickered across his face, hurt, maybe, or recognition. I loved you, you know, in the beginning. Maybe you did. But love doesn't steal. Love doesn't abuse. Love doesn't lie for 6 months while planning an exit strategy. Vivian stood up. Sign the papers or don't. Either way, this marriage is over. You just get to decide whether you do it the easy way or the hard way. She walked out of the conference room, leaving Margaret to handle the details. Rebecca was waiting in the lobby, and together they walked out into a London afternoon that felt lighter than it had in months. Did he sign? Rebecca asked. I don't know. I don't care. Vivian tilted her face toward the sun, weak though it was. Either way, I'm done. Her phone rang an hour later, Margaret triumphant. He's signed. Everything. The divorce, the repayment plan, the non-disparagement agreement. It's over, Vivian. You're free. Free. The word sounded foreign, like a language she'd forgotten she knew. Vivian sat down on a bench outside her office building and tried to absorb it. After 9 years together, 8 years married, 6 months of hell, it was just over. Done. Finished. What happens now? Now we wait for the court to process the paperwork. Should be finalized in about 8 weeks. The repayment plan starts immediately. He owes you £1,000 a month until the debt is cleared. If he misses a payment, we can pursue legal action. Will he actually pay? He'll have to. I've arranged for automatic deductions from any employment income. The minute he gets a job, the money comes to you. Margaret paused. How does it feel? Vivian thought about it, searching for the right words. Empty. Like I should feel victorious, but I just feel tired. That's normal. You've been in survival mode for weeks. Now that the threat's gone, your body's crashing. Margaret's voice softened. Take some time, Vivian. Rest. Heal. Figure out who you are without him. I don't know who that is anymore. Then you get to find out. That's the gift in all of this. You get to become whoever you want to be. That night, Vivian went back to Rebecca's house and slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, the world looked different. Brighter, maybe? Or maybe she was just seeing it clearly for the first time in years. She spent the next few weeks settling back into her life. Clients who'd been nervous about the drama started calling again. Her business, which she'd been too distracted to run properly, began to stabilize. She moved fully back into her house, reclaiming spaces that had felt haunted by Adrian's absence. And slowly, carefully, she started to remember what it felt like to be just Vivian. Not Adrian's wife, not the woman scorned, not the victim fighting back, just herself. She was having coffee with a potential client 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized when she saw him. A man sitting alone at a corner table, reading a book, looking comfortable in his own skin in a way that caught her attention. He glanced up, caught her looking, smiled. She looked away, embarrassed. Focused on her client meeting, tried to ignore the way her heart had kicked up for just a moment. When the meeting ended and she was gathering her things, he appeared beside her table. Up close, he was handsome in an understated way, dark hair graying at the temples, kind eyes, the kind of face that looked like it smiled often. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but I couldn't help overhearing part of your meeting. You're a brand consultant. I am. I'm Nolan Pierce. We actually met a few weeks ago, at your house. I handled your father's estate. He offered his hand and she shook it, remembering. I have a friend who's looking for exactly your expertise. Would you mind if I passed along your information? Not at all. Vivian handed him a business card, noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, then immediately felt guilty for noticing. Thank you. He pocketed the card, started to leave, then turned back. I know this is forward and feel free to say no, but would you like to have coffee sometime? Not business, just coffee. Vivian opened her mouth to say no, that she'd just gotten divorced, that she wasn't ready. But then she looked at this man who was asking politely, who'd helped her when he didn't have to, who was looking at her like she was a person worth knowing rather than a problem to solve. Yes, she said. I'd like that. Really? He looked surprised, pleased. I'll call you this week then, if that's okay. It's okay. She watched him leave, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not love. She was far too smart and too scarred for that. But maybe interest. Maybe possibility. Maybe just the simple recognition that her life wasn't over. It was just beginning again. Nolan called 3 days later on a Wednesday evening when Vivian was working late in her home office. She'd been staring at spreadsheets for hours, trying to focus on client projections, but her mind kept wandering to places she didn't want it to go. The sound of her phone ringing made her jump. Vivian, it's Nolan Pierce. Is this a bad time? No, actually, I could use a distraction from quarterly forecasts. She saved her work, closed her laptop. How are you? Good. Busy, but good. Listen, I know I said I'd call about coffee, but I was wondering if you'd be interested in something slightly more substantial. There's a gallery opening in Shoreditch on Friday night, contemporary art. Should be interesting. Would you like to come? Vivian's first instinct was to say no. It was too soon, too much, too reminiscent of how she'd met Adrian all those years ago at a gallery opening. But then she thought about Margaret's words. You get to become whoever you want to be. And the person she wanted to be wasn't someone who let her past dictate her future. I'd like that. What time? 7? I can pick you up if you'd like, or we can meet there. I'll meet you there. She wasn't ready for him to know where she lived, wasn't ready for that level of trust yet. Send me the address? Will do. And Vivian? I'm glad you said yes. After he hung up, she sat there holding the phone, feeling equal parts terrified and exhilarated. Rebecca called it progress when Vivian told her that night. Margaret called it reckless when she found out the next day. You barely know this man, Margaret said over lunch, using her attorney voice. What if he's another Adrian? He's not. You don't know that. No, but I know myself better now. I know what red flags look like. I know what I won't tolerate. Vivian pushed salad around her plate. And besides, it's just a gallery opening, not a marriage proposal. Famous last words. But Margaret's expression softened. Just be careful, okay? You've been through enough. Friday came faster than Vivian expected. She spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing an outfit, finally settling on a simple black dress that made her feel confident without trying too hard. Rebecca came over to provide moral support and unsolicited advice. Don't mention the divorce, Rebecca said, watching Vivian apply lipstick. At least not on the first date. It's not a date. It's a gallery opening. With a man you're attracted to who asked you out. That's a date. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bathtub, grinning. When's the last time you did this? Went on an actual first date? Vivian thought back. 9 years ago, with Adrian. Then you're overdue. Rebecca stood, gave her a quick hug. Have fun. Be yourself. And text me if you need an escape route. The gallery was packed when Vivian arrived, full of people who looked like they took art very seriously. She spotted Nolan near the entrance, wearing a dark sweater and jeans, looking more relaxed than he had in his business attire. He smiled when he saw her, and she felt that kick in her chest again. You made it, he said. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Why wouldn't I? Most people get nervous about gallery openings. Too much pretension, not enough wine. He handed her a glass from a passing waiter. But you don't strike me as someone who gets nervous easily. You'd be surprised. Vivian took a sip, let the wine settle her nerves. I haven't done this in a while. Gallery openings? Any of this. She gestured vaguely at the crowd, at him, at the situation. Social things with new people. Then we'll start small. What do you think of that piece? He pointed to a canvas covered in what looked like random paint splatters. Genius or garbage? Vivian studied it, grateful for the redirect. Honestly, I think it's trying too hard to be profound when it's just messy. Nolan laughed, genuine and warm. That's exactly what I thought, but I was afraid to say it in case everyone else saw something I was missing. They moved through the gallery, critiquing art with increasingly irreverent commentary. Nolan was easy to talk to, the kind of person who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He didn't talk over her or try to impress her with his knowledge. He just seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. Can I ask you something? He said when they'd made it through half the gallery. And feel free to tell me it's none of my business. Okay. Your father talked about you a lot, about how smart you were, how talented, how he wished you knew your own worth. Nolan looked at her directly. Did you ever believe him? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I thought I did. But looking back, I think I spent a lot of years trying to prove he was right, instead of just accepting that he was. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out who I am without needing anyone's validation, including my own. She finished her wine, set the glass down. That probably sounds ridiculous. No, it sounds honest. He paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I know you're going through a divorce. Your father's provisions made that pretty clear. I don't need to know the details, but I want you to know I'm not trying to be a rebound or a distraction or whatever people call it. I just think you're interesting, and I'd like to get to know you better, if that's something you're open to. Vivian looked at this man who was being straightforward and kind, who wasn't playing games or expecting anything from her. I don't know what I'm open to yet. I'm still figuring out how to be single after 8 years of marriage. Fair enough. Then how about we just be two people looking at questionable art and seeing where it goes? I can do that. They stayed at the gallery for another hour, eventually moving to a quiet wine bar nearby where they could actually hear each other talk. Nolan told her about his work as an estate attorney, the strange and sad stories that came with managing other people's inheritances. Vivian told him about her consulting business, the clients she loved, and the ones that made her question her career choices. Your father was proud of what you built, Nolan said over their second glass of wine. He used to show me articles about your company, tell me about contracts you'd landed. He thought you had something special. Did he? Vivian felt her throat tighten. He never said that to me. Some men don't know how to say these things. They show it in other ways. Nolan pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, showed her one of her father at his desk. Behind him, barely visible, was a framed article about Vivian's business. He kept this on his wall, looked at it every day. Vivian stared at the photo, at her father's office preserved in pixels, at the evidence of love she'd never known existed. How did you get this? Took it the last time I visited him, about 2 months before he died. He was already sick by then, knew he didn't have much time left. He spent most of that meeting talking about you, about making sure you'd be protected. Nolan put his phone away. He was a good man. Probably didn't say it enough, but he loved you more than anything. I miss him. The words came out rough, unsteady. I miss him so much, and I hate that he's not here to see me finally figure things out. He'd be proud anyway. He'd be proud that you fought back, that you didn't let someone take advantage of you, that you're rebuilding. Nolan reached across the table, touched her hand briefly. I'm proud of you, and I barely know you. They talked until the wine bar started closing, until the staff were pointedly stacking chairs. Vivian couldn't remember the last time she'd lost track of time like this, so absorbed in conversation that hours passed without notice. Can I walk you to your car? Nolan asked as they left. I took the tube. Then let me make sure you get there safely. He fell into step beside her, hands in his pockets, not trying to touch her or crowd her space. When can I see you again? I don't know. Soon? Vivian stopped at the tube entrance, looked at him. I need to be honest with you. I'm a mess right now. The divorce is finalized, but I'm still dealing with the fallout. My ex-husband owes me money he probably can't pay. His girlfriend is harassing me from wherever she ran off to, and I'm trying to rebuild a life I don't fully understand yet. That's a lot of baggage. Everyone has baggage. Yours just happens to be recent and well documented. Nolan smiled. I'm not asking you to be perfect or have everything figured out. I'm just asking if I can take you to dinner next week, somewhere nice where we can talk more. No pressure, no expectations. Okay, yes, I'd like that. He didn't try to kiss her, didn't push for more than she was ready to give, just smiled, said goodnight, and watched until she was safely through the turnstiles before walking away. Vivian rode the tube home feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. When she got back to her house, truly hers now, she found herself smiling for no particular reason. Rebecca called within minutes of her walking through the door. Well, how was it? Good, really good, actually. Details. I need details. We looked at art, drank wine, talked about my father. He asked me to dinner next week. And you said yes? I said yes. Vivian kicked off her shoes, collapsed on the sofa. Is that crazy? Am I crazy for even considering dating someone right now? You're not crazy. You're human, and you deserve to have good things happen to you. Rebecca paused. But be careful, okay? Take it slow. You're still healing. I know. Vivian looked around her living room, at the space she'd reclaimed from Adrian's presence. But I think I'm ready to start living again. Not just surviving, but actually living. She went to bed that night feeling hopeful for the first time since the divorce. But hope, as she'd learned, could be fragile. And Adrian wasn't done making her life difficult. The first payment came through on schedule, deposited directly into Vivian's account. £1,000, the first installment of 42. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a reminder that Adrian would be part of her financial life for the next 3.5 years. Margaret called the day after the payment cleared. He's working again, some entry-level position at a smaller firm. They're garnishing his wages directly. Good. There's something else. Danny's been keeping tabs on him, and Margaret hesitated, which was never a good sign. He's been posting on social media, about you indirectly. Nothing that violates the non-disparagement agreement technically, but definitely skirting the line. Vivian felt her stomach drop. What's he saying? Vague posts about betrayal and vengeful women. Nothing with your name, but anyone who knows you both would understand who he's talking about. Margaret's voice hardened. I can send him a cease and desist, remind him what he signed. Do it. I'm done letting him control the narrative. The cease and desist went out that afternoon. By evening, all of Adrian's posts had been deleted. But the damage was done. Vivian started getting messages from mutual acquaintances, people asking if she was okay, people taking sides without knowing the full story. She ignored most of them, but one message caught her attention from a woman named Claire who'd been in their wedding party. "I can't believe what Adrian's been saying about you. I know it's none of my business, but I wanted you to know. I saw him at a bar last week with Lila. They were together. Whatever he's posting about moving on is a lie." Vivian stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in her chest. Lila was back, which meant the harassment would probably start again too. She was right. 2 days later, a package arrived at her office. No return address, just her name in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "Thought you should know what your ex really thinks of you." Every instinct told her not to plug it in, not to engage with whatever game this was. But curiosity won. She inserted the drive into her laptop, found a single audio file. It was a recording of Adrian, drunk and bitter, talking to someone, probably Lila, about Vivian. The words were vicious, personal, designed to hurt. He called her cold, frigid, a control freak who'd driven him away. He said marrying her had been the biggest mistake of his life. He said things about her body, her personality, her worth that made her feel physically ill. Vivian listened to the whole thing, then forwarded it to Margaret without comment. Margaret called back within the hour. "That's a clear violation of the non-disparagement agreement. We can take him back to court, potentially hold him in contempt. He probably doesn't even know she recorded it. Doesn't matter. He said it, it exists, and it's being used to harass you." Margaret's voice was ice. "Let me handle this." "What will you do?" "Remind them both that actions have consequences, and that we're not afraid to use the legal system to enforce our rights." A pause. "How are you doing? Really?" Vivian thought about it. A week ago, hearing Adrian say those things would have destroyed her. But now, having heard them, she just felt tired. "I'm okay. It hurts, but it doesn't break me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You're healing." Margaret filed a motion for contempt that afternoon. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, which gave Adrian plenty of time to panic. Vivian spent those 2 weeks trying to move forward with her life, having dinner with Nolan, rebuilding her client base, learning to sleep without nightmares. The dinner with Nolan became a regular thing. Once a week, they'd meet at different restaurants around London, talking about everything except her divorce. He told her about his daughter from his first marriage, a university student studying medicine. She told him about her business dreams, the consulting empire she wanted to build. "You should do it," he said over Italian food on their 4th dinner. "Expand, hire people, become the firm everyone wants to work with. That takes capital I don't have right now." "Your father's fund is for security, not risk." Vivian shook her head. "I need to build this myself. Prove I can do it without safety nets." "Why? Who are you proving it to?" The question stopped her. Who was she proving it to? Her father was dead. Adrian was gone. The only person left was herself, and she was tired of having something to prove. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Maybe I'm just scared of failing." "Then fail. Build something. Watch it not work. Learn from it. Try again." Nolan leaned forward, earnest. "You spent 8 years playing it safe in a marriage that wasn't working. Maybe it's time to take some risks that actually matter." She thought about that for days, about risk and safety and the difference between being careful and being afraid, about what she really wanted from her life now that she got to choose. The contempt hearing arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. Vivian walked into the courthouse with Margaret, prepared for another round of watching Adrian try to justify his behavior. But when they got to the courtroom, Adrian wasn't there. His court-appointed lawyer was, looking frustrated and apologetic. "Your Honor, I apologize. My client was supposed to be here. I've been trying to reach him all morning with no success." The judge was not amused. "This is a contempt hearing. His presence is required." "I understand, Your Honor. I can only assume—" "You can assume he's decided that court orders don't apply to him." The judge looked at Margaret. "Mrs. Chen, what would your client like to do?" "Issue a bench warrant for his arrest, Your Honor. Mr. Cross has repeatedly violated court orders, harassed my client despite a restraining order, and now failed to appear when summoned. This is a pattern of behavior that requires enforcement." The judge didn't hesitate. "Warrant issued. If Mr. Cross wants to explain himself, he can do it from a holding cell." They found Adrian 3 days later, not in some dramatic escape attempt, but drunk in a hotel room in Brighton with Lila. Both were arrested for violating the restraining order. Both spent a night in jail before their respective lawyers could sort it out. Margaret called Vivian with the news, barely containing her satisfaction. He's in custody. She's in custody. The judge is not happy, and they're both facing serious consequences. What kind of consequences? For Adrian, possibly jail time if the judge decides he's had enough chances. For Lila, a restraining order violation and possible criminal harassment charges. Margaret paused. This could actually be over, Vivian. Really over. The final hearing was set for a week later. Vivian almost didn't go. Margaret said she didn't need to be there, that they had enough evidence to win without her testimony. But she wanted to see it, wanted to watch Adrian finally face consequences for everything he'd done. The courtroom was packed with other cases, other lives falling apart in legal language. When Adrian's case was called, he shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the confident man who'd taken her to dinner at Lumiere all those months ago. Lila was there too, seated separately, looking defiant even in her orange jumpsuit. They didn't look at each other, didn't acknowledge what they'd become. The judge reviewed the violations methodically. The recordings, the social media posts, the package sent to Vivian's office. The midnight reunion in Brighton that violated restraining orders for both of them. The pattern of harassment and intimidation despite multiple court orders. Mr. Cross, the judge said finally, I gave you chances, multiple chances to comply with court orders, to treat your ex-wife with basic human decency, to take responsibility for your actions. You've squandered every single one. I'm sentencing you to 90 days in jail for contempt of court, with credit for time served. Additionally, the restraining order is extended for 5 years, and any further violations will result in additional jail time. Adrian's face went white. Your Honor, I can't. I have a job. I need to make payments. You should have thought of that before violating a court order. Again, the judge turned to Lila. Ms. Mercer, you're facing criminal harassment charges in addition to the restraining order violation. I'm setting bail at £10,000, and if you're convicted, you'll be facing jail time as well. Lila started to cry, which might have been effective if she hadn't spent the past 6 months proving she was capable of calculated cruelty. The judge was unmoved. I want to be very clear to both of you, the judge continued. Mrs. Hale has done nothing wrong. She has exercised her legal rights to protect herself from abuse, theft, and harassment. Your attempts to paint her as vindictive or cruel are transparent lies designed to avoid accountability. If either of you contact her again in any way, I will throw the book at you. Do you understand? They both nodded, deflated and defeated. Vivian watched them being led away in handcuffs and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a vast sense of relief that it was finally, truly over. Outside the courthouse, Margaret gave her a rare hug. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. No, you did it. You fought back when most people would have given up. You stood your ground and demanded justice. That takes strength most people don't have. Margaret pulled back, looked at her seriously. What are you going to do now? Vivian thought about Nolan waiting for her at a cafe nearby, about the business plans she'd been sketching, about the life that was waiting for her to claim it. I'm going to live. Actually live, not just survive. Build something that matters, spend time with people who deserve it, and stop apologizing for taking up space. Sounds like a plan. She met Nolan at the cafe, slid into the booth across from him, and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 9 years. How'd it go? He asked. Adrian's in jail for 90 days, Lila's facing criminal charges. The judge extended the restraining order for 5 years. It's done. She accepted the coffee he'd ordered for her, wrapped her hands around the warmth. It's actually done. How do you feel? Exhausted, relieved, free. She looked at him, this man who'd been patient with her mess, who'd asked for nothing except her company. And ready for whatever comes next. Speaking of what comes next, Nolan said carefully, I've been thinking about something. You mentioned wanting to expand your business but being scared of the risk. I remember. What if you had a partner, not romantic, business? Someone with capital to invest, contacts in the corporate world, and faith in what you're building. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable, and I think what you're doing is worth investing in. Vivian opened the folder, found a proposal for a business partnership that was generous to the point of being almost charitable. Nolan, I can't accept this. Why not? Because it's too much. Because we barely know each other. Because I don't want you to invest in me out of pity. I'm not. He leaned forward. I'm investing because I believe in you. Because I've seen what you've built despite everything working against you. Because your father would have wanted someone to help you the way he couldn't. He touched her hand. And because I'm falling for you, and I want to see you succeed. Even if we don't work out romantically, I still want to be part of what you build. Vivian felt tears threatening, the good kind this time. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Take the proposal, review it, talk to your lawyer. If you decide it's not right, we'll never mention it again. But if you decide you want a partner, a real partner who believes in you, the offer stands. She took the folder home, read through the proposal 3 times, then called Margaret to review it. A week later, she signed the papers that made Nolan Pierce a 25% partner in her consulting firm, with a clear agreement that kept business separate from whatever was developing between them personally. The money let her hire 2 employees, move into a proper office, and start pitching to clients she'd never have dared approach before. Within 3 months, she doubled her client base. Within 6, she was turning down work because she couldn't keep up with demand. Adrian served his 90 days and got out to find his garnished wages waiting. He paid Vivian like clockwork. He had no choice. The courts made sure of that. She never saw him, never heard from him except through automatic bank deposits. He became a ghost, a mistake, a chapter that was finally closed. Lila took a plea deal on the harassment charges, avoided jail time, but ended up with a record and a restraining order that would follow her for years. The last Vivian heard, she'd moved to Manchester, was working retail, had traded Instagram glamour for real-life consequences. Vivian didn't celebrate their suffering. She just acknowledged it existed and moved on with her own life. A year after the divorce was finalized, Vivian stood in her house, the house her father had left her, the house that had always been hers, and looked around at what she'd built. Photos of her and Rebecca on the mantle, her business awards on the wall, fresh flowers in the kitchen. A life that was completely, authentically hers. Nolan was there too, had been spending more time at her place as their relationship deepened from business partners to something more. He was in the kitchen making dinner, humming off-key, comfortable in her space in a way Adrian never had been. "You okay?" he called out. "You've been standing there for 5 minutes." "I'm good." Vivian walked into the kitchen, wrapped her arms around him from behind, just thinking about how different everything is now. Better different or worse different? Better, definitely better. She rested her head against his back, felt the solid warmth of him. "I never thought I'd get here. Never thought I'd feel safe again, or happy, or like myself." Nolan turned around, pulled her close. "You did that. Not me. Not anyone else. You fought for this life and you earned it. We did it together. Maybe. But you did the hard part." He kissed her forehead. "I'm just glad I get to be here for the aftermath." They had dinner on the back patio, watching the London sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Vivian thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken and desperate in a restaurant, watching her marriage explode. She barely recognized that person anymore. "Can I tell you something?" she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Always. I'm happy, really, genuinely happy, and I didn't think that was possible anymore." She looked at him. "Thank you. For being patient with me, for believing in me, for not trying to fix me. You didn't need fixing, you just needed space to heal." Nolan reached across the table, took her hand. "And I'm happy too. Happier than I've been in years. So thank you for letting me in." Later that night, after Nolan had gone home and Vivian was alone with her thoughts, she found herself in her father's study. The photo of them at her wedding was still on the desk, but she'd added new ones. Her and Rebecca. Her and Nolan. Her team at the office. Pictures of a life that was messy and imperfect and completely hers. "I did it, Dad," she said to the empty room. "I got free. I built something. I'm okay." She could almost hear his response, gruff and proud, could almost feel his hand on her shoulder, the way he used to do when she was small and scared. He'd always known she was stronger than she believed. It had just taken her 9 years and a destroyed marriage to figure it out. The next morning, Vivian woke up to an email from one of the clients she'd landed with her expanded firm. A major contract, 6 figures, Exactly the kind of work she dreamed about when she first started her business. She read it twice to make sure it was real, then called Rebecca. "I got it. The Brennan account. They want to sign." Rebecca screamed loud enough that Vivian had to hold the phone away from her ear. "Oh my God, that's huge! We're celebrating. Tonight. No arguments." They went to a wine bar in Covent Garden, the three of them, Vivian, Rebecca, and Nolan. Margaret joined them later, fresh from court, looking pleased with herself. "Heard about the Brennan contract," Margaret said, accepting a glass of champagne. "Congratulations, you're officially a success." "I don't know about that." "I do. A year ago, you were fighting for your life. Now you're building an empire." Margaret raised her glass. To Vivian Hale, who refused to be broken. They all drank to that. Vivian felt tears threatening again, the good kind, the kind that came from being surrounded by people who actually cared about her. "Can I make a toast?" Rebecca said, standing up with the earnestness of someone who'd had 2 glasses of wine. "To my sister, who is the strongest, smartest, most badass woman I know, who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into fuel, who didn't just survive, she won." "Hear, hear," Nolan said, kissing Vivian's temple. They stayed at the wine bar until closing, laughing and drinking and celebrating a victory that had taken a year to achieve. When Vivian finally got home, pleasantly buzzed and thoroughly happy, she found a letter waiting for her. It was from Hartwell and Sterling's legal department. A check for £23,000, Adrian's share of the money he'd stolen from the company, recovered through their criminal prosecution. A note explained that since Vivian had provided evidence that helped their case, they were passing along the recovered funds. She stared at the check, at this unexpected windfall, and felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't about the money, it was about justice, about the universe occasionally balancing the scales, about evidence that good things could happen to people who fought for themselves. She deposited the check the next day, then did something she'd been thinking about for months. She called the charity her father had supported, a foundation that helped women escape domestic violence, and made a donation in his name. £50,000, the money from Adrian's theft, plus some of her own earnings. "In memory of Robert Hale," she told the woman who took the donation, who taught his daughter that she deserved better. The foundation sent her a thank you note a week later, along with information about the women they'd helped with her donation. Reading their stories, women who'd escaped abuse, rebuilt their lives, found safety, Vivian felt connected to something larger than her own experience. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was helping others survive too. 6 months later, Vivian stood in front of a room full of business students at a London university telling her story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The husband who'd stolen from her, the girlfriend who'd harassed her, the legal battles and the sleepless nights, and the moments when she'd wanted to give up. "People ask me if I regret the marriage," she said to the attentive crowd. "If I wish I'd never met Adrian, never wasted those years. And the honest answer is no. Because those years taught me what I was capable of. They taught me my own strength. They forced me to become the person I was always meant to be." A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What would you say to someone who's in a bad relationship but scared to leave?" Vivian thought about that woman she'd been, sitting in Lumiere, watching her world crack apart. "I'd say fear is normal, but staying because you're scared is different from staying because you want to. And if you're staying only because leaving seems impossible, it's not. It's hard, it's painful, it costs more than you think you can afford. But it's possible. And on the other side of that fear is a life that's actually yours." The talk ended to applause. Several students approached her afterward with questions, with their own stories, with the kind of hope that came from seeing someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Vivian gave them her business card, told them to reach out if they needed advice, and meant it. She was walking to her car when her phone rang. An unknown number, which she normally wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Hale? This is Officer Chen with the Metropolitan Police. I'm calling about Adrian Cross." Vivian's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Nothing to worry about. We arrested him last night for drunk and disorderly conduct. He's been asking to speak with you." "Tell him no." "We tried. He's quite insistent. Says he needs to apologize, that it's important." The officer paused. "You're under no obligation to see him. I just wanted to inform you of the request." Vivian thought about it. Thought about the man who destroyed their marriage, stolen her money, harassed her for months. The man who'd spent 90 days in jail and apparently learned nothing. I'll think about it. She didn't have to think long. The answer was no. Had always been no. Would always be no. She called the police station back 20 minutes later and left a message. Tell Adrian Cross that I wish him well, but I have nothing to say to him. Our business is concluded. That should have been the end. But 3 days later, a letter arrived at her office. From Adrian, postmarked from wherever he was living now. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, handwritten, smudged like it had been written and rewritten multiple times.
Vivian, I know you told the police you don't want to hear from me, and I'll respect that. This is the last time I'll try to reach you. I just need to say this, even if you never read it. I'm sorry. Not the performative kind of sorry where I try to make excuses or minimize what I did. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry for everything. For the affair, for the theft, for the way I treated you, for trying to paint you as the villain when I was the one who destroyed everything good we had. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty, respect, partnership. Instead, I gave you lies and betrayal and financial abuse. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away. I see it clearly, finally, and it makes me sick to realize how badly I hurt you. You're going to have an amazing life. You probably already do. And I'll spend the rest of mine regretting that I'm not part of it. I'm sorry, Vivian, for everything. Adrian. She read it twice, felt something like closure wash over her. It wasn't about forgiveness. She wasn't sure she'd ever forgive him, and that was okay. It was about acknowledgement, about him finally taking responsibility for what he'd done. She put the letter in a drawer and didn't think about it again. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, Vivian married Nolan in a small ceremony at her house. Just family and close friends, no pretension, no performance. Rebecca was her maid of honor. Nolan's daughter read a poem. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising partnership and honesty and showing up for each other even when it was hard. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. They fought sometimes, disagreed about business decisions, had to work at understanding each other. But they did it together as equals, with respect and care, and the kind of love that didn't require anyone to be less than they were. The business Vivian had built continued to grow. She hired more staff, opened a second office, became the consultant everyone wanted to work with. She started speaking at conferences, mentoring young entrepreneurs, using her experience to help others avoid the mistakes she'd made. And sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd walk through her house and marvel at how different her life had become. How she'd gone from a woman who'd let herself be erased to someone who took up space unapologetically. How she'd turned her biggest failure into her greatest strength. Adrian finished paying back the £42,000 in his 36th month of payments. Vivian received the final installment with barely a flicker of emotion. The money had never really been the point. The point was that he'd been held accountable, that justice had been served, that she'd refused to be a victim. She donated that final payment to the domestic violence charity too, along with a note, in celebration of freedom. 5 years after the divorce, Vivian stood in her office overlooking the Thames and thought about the woman she'd been, the one who'd sat in Lumiere and watched her world explode. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone she'd known briefly and left behind. "You okay?" Nolan asked, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "More than okay." She leaned back against him, solid and safe. "Just thinking about how far I've come." "We've come." "No." She turned to face him. "I've come. You walked beside me, but I did the hard work. I fought the battles. I became this person." She touched his face. "And I'm grateful you're here. But this life, this strength, this peace, I built that myself." He smiled, proud and loving. "Yes, you did. You." That night, Vivian deleted every photo of Adrian from her phone, every email, every reminder that he'd once been part of her life. She kept the lessons he'd taught her, about her own strength, about red flags, about the difference between love and control. But the man himself? He could fade into memory, into history, into the past where he belonged. She was free. Completely, finally free. And the life stretching out ahead of her was more beautiful than any she could have imagined in that restaurant 2.5 years ago. Adrian had thought betrayal would destroy her. Instead, it had forced her to become stronger, sharper, and completely untouchable.
What he'd meant as her ending had become the beginning of everything she was always meant to be. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.